Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash won the Orange League and Professor Ivy and her assistants joined his harem. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Victor and the Scholar. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a tidal wave of sound that crashed against the stadium walls and hammered at Ash Ketchum's bones. It was the sound of 100,000 people witnessing the impossible. On the scorched battlefield below, his Pikachu stood on trembling legs, chest heaving, tiny sparks still dancing across his yellow fur like dying embers. Across from him, a crater marked the final resting place of Drake's Dragonite, the champion's indomitable ace, now unconscious and defeated. The silence that had fallen in the instant of the final, cataclysmic thunderbolt was shattered. The referee's voice, amplified by the stadium speakers, was almost lost in the din. Dragonite is unable to battle. Pikachu is the winner. Which means the victory, and the Orange League Championship, goes to the challenger, Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. Ash didn't hear the words. He felt them. He felt the wave of elation from the crowd, the surge of fierce, loyal pride from Pikachu, the exhausted relief from his other Pokémon resting in their Pokeballs on his belt. For a moment, the world was a symphony of emotion, so clear and vibrant it threatened to overwhelm him. He stumbled forward, his own legs feeling as shaky as Pikachu's. "Pikachu, we did it," he breathed, scooping the electric mouse into his arms. "Pika Pi." Pikachu chirped, a weak but triumphant sound, and nuzzled against his trainer's cheek. Ash hugged him tight, burying his face in the familiar fur. But something was different. The bond he'd always shared with Pikachu, that unspoken understanding, was now a roaring current of energy flowing between them. He could feel Pikachu's exhaustion not as an observation, but as a shared weariness in his own limbs. He could feel the mouse's boundless affection for him as a warmth spreading through his own chest. His eyes drifted to his hands. They felt strange, humming with a residual energy. He remembered the final moments of the battle. Dragonite had been relentless, a force of nature shrugging off every attack. Tauros, Lapras, Snorlax, all defeated. It had come down to Pikachu, his first friend, his last hope. Dragonite had unleashed a hyper beam, a torrent of destructive power that should have ended it. But Ash had refused to lose. He had screamed Pikachu's name, pouring every ounce of his will, his desperation, his absolute, unshakable faith into his partner. And the world had answered. A light, brilliant and golden, had erupted from his chest, enveloping him and flowing down his outstretched arm into Pikachu. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a strategy. It was instinct. It was a prayer answered with thunder. Pikachu's subsequent thunderbolt hadn't been just electricity, it had been something more, something elemental and pure that had torn through the hyper beam and struck the final, decisive blow. Now, standing in the center of the stadium as officials and photographers swarmed the field, Ash felt the echo of that power thrumming just beneath his skin. It made the world feel sharper, the colors more vivid, the sounds clearer. It was like a veil had been lifted from his senses. Misty and Tracy were the first to reach him, their faces alight with a mixture of shock and ecstatic joy. "You did it. I can't believe you actually did it." Misty yelled, her voice hoarse from screaming. She threw her arms around him in a rare, unreserved hug, momentarily forgetting to be exasperated. "That was the most incredible battle I've ever sketched," Tracy said, his eyes wide with analytical awe. He tapped his pencil against his notepad. That final thunderbolt, it defied all known metrics. For a Pikachu's electrical output, it was extraordinary. Ash just nodded, still trying to process the sensory overload. He met Misty's eyes over his shoulder. For a second, her triumphant grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "Ash? Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," he said, his voice quieter than he intended. "Just tired." It wasn't a lie. He was tired, but it was a deep, fundamental exhaustion, as if he'd run a marathon with his soul. He forced a grin, the familiar, cocky expression he'd worn 100 times before. "Come on, we've got a trophy to collect." The celebration that followed was a blur of flashing lights, handshakes, and the presentation of the winner's trophy. Ash moved through it on autopilot, his new senses a constant, low-level hum in the back of his mind. He could feel the genuine admiration from Drake as they shook hands, the champion's respect earned in the crucible of battle. He could feel the simmering pride of his Pokémon, even Charizard, who watched the proceedings from his Pokeball with a grudging, fiery approval that Ash could now perceive as clearly as a spoken word. Later that evening, in the suite provided for them, the trophy gleaming on a table, the reality began to settle in. Misty and Tracy were chattering excitedly, planning their route back to the Kanto mainland. Ash sat by the window, looking out at the glittering lights of Pomelo Island. He held up his hand again, staring at the palm. He tried to summon the feeling, the golden light. He focused, remembering the desperation, the will to win. For a heartbeat, a faint, warm glow flickered over his skin before vanishing. It left him feeling dizzy and even more drained. "There it is again," Misty's voice cut through his concentration. She was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her usual boisterous energy replaced with a quiet concern. "You've been weird ever since the battle ended. What's going on?" Ash let his hand fall. How could he explain it? That he could suddenly hear her worry as a soft, anxious hum. That he could feel Tracy's academic curiosity from the other room as a series of sharp, analytical pulses. "I don't know," he admitted, the words feeling heavy and inadequate. "During the fight, something happened. With me and Pikachu." Tracy walked in, holding the GS ball. It was a strange, ornate sphere, half gold, half silver, with bold red lettering that no one could decipher. Professor Oak's unsolved mystery. "He's right, Misty. I've been reviewing my sketches and the broadcast footage. There was a visible energy discharge from Ash just before Pikachu's final attack. It looked almost like, well, it's scientifically unprecedented." Misty looked from Tracy's serious face to Ash's troubled one. "An energy discharge? What are you talking about?" "It was warm," Ash said, trying to find the words. "It felt like everything was connected." He shook his head, frustrated. "I can't explain it." He looked at the GS ball in Tracy's hands. His next mission. Deliver it to Professor Ivy on Valencia Island. For the first time, the simple errand felt like part of something much larger. "We should get going. We promised Professor Oak we'd deliver that to Professor Ivy." Misty's expression softened. She walked over and sat next to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Hey. Whatever it was, you won. You're the Orange League champion. Maybe you just unlocked some new kind of bond with Pikachu. A champion's bond." He wanted to believe it was that simple. But the feeling in his gut, a low, resonant intuition he'd never had before, told him it was something more. Something that had been sleeping inside him his whole life, and had just been violently shaken awake. The journey to Valencia Island aboard the blimp was quiet. Ash spent most of it looking out the window, the vast, blue expanse of the ocean a calming presence. He practiced, in small, subtle ways. He'd reach out with his feelings, trying to sense the emotional state of his Pokémon without releasing them. He could feel Squirtle's boisterous confidence, Bulbasaur's stoic calm, Snorlax's profound and unshakable contentment. It was becoming easier, less draining. It was like flexing a muscle he never knew he had. When the lush, tropical paradise of Valencia Island came into view, Ash felt a strange sense of anticipation. This was where his next task began. The blimp landed smoothly in a clearing near a sprawling, modern complex nestled amongst the palm trees. The building was all clean white lines and broad glass panels, a stark beacon of science in the heart of the jungle. As they disembarked, the humid air thick with the scent of salt and exotic flowers, the main door to the laboratory slid open. A woman stepped out, and the first thing Ash noticed was the sheer, uncompromising intelligence in her eyes. She had long, flowing purple hair tied back loosely, and wore a pristine lab coat over a simple, practical outfit. She moved with an air of purpose, her gaze sharp and analytical. This had to be Professor Ivy. Ash Ketchum, I presume, she said, her voice smooth and professional, though not unkind. I'm Professor Ivy. I received word from Professor Oak to expect you. And this must be Misty and Tracy. Welcome to my laboratory. Before they could even respond, 3 more women emerged from the lab behind her, each distinct and immediately memorable. The first, a woman with vibrant pink hair and a warm, open smile, stepped forward. It's so wonderful to meet you all. I'm Charity. I help the professor with Pokemon care and fieldwork. She had a kind, nurturing energy that Ash could feel instantly, a gentle hum of empathy. The second, with short, stylish blue hair, remained by the doorway, her eyes fixed on a data pad in her hands. She glanced up, her expression one of detached curiosity, before her gaze flickered back to her screen. Hope, she said, her voice quiet but clear. I handle data analysis and systems management. Her presence felt like a network of focused, logical thought. The third woman didn't move from her position, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed. She had striking green hair cut in a sharp, practical style and a physique that spoke of rigorous physical training. Her eyes, a piercing shade of amber, scanned all of them, but lingered on Ash with an intensity that was almost unnerving. She was assessing him, weighing him. Faith, she announced, her voice firm and low. Head of Lab Security. Her aura was a coiled spring of readiness and fierce loyalty. Professor Ivy gestured for them to enter. My assistants are indispensable. We run a tight ship here. Now, the GS ball. Professor Oak's notes were, frustratingly vague. He seems to think it's some sort of revolutionary new pokeball, but all our scans have shown it to be completely inert. A sealed, indecipherable curiosity. The lab's interior was as impressive as its exterior. It was bright, airy, and impeccably organized, with holographic displays flickering beside workstations laden with complex machinery. Pokemon of various types, many of them unique to the Orange Archipelago, rested in comfortable-looking habitats integrated into the lab's design. Here it is, Professor, Tracy said, reverently holding out the GS ball. Ivy took it, her expression one of pure scientific fascination. She handled it like a priceless artifact, turning it over in her hands. Remarkable craftsmanship. The alloy is unlike anything on record. She placed it onto a diagnostic platform in the center of the lab. A containment field shimmered into existence around it as a dozen scanners and sensors whirred to life. On a large monitor, complex data streams scrolled by. Just as I thought, Ivy murmured, her eyes darting across the screen. Zero energy signature. No internal mechanism detected. Biologically, chemically, electronically, it's a blank. A perfectly constructed object with no discernible purpose. Hope looked up from her console. Professor, the material's quantum signature is stable. It's not emitting or absorbing anything. It might as well be a rock. Ash stepped closer, drawn by an inexplicable pull. As he neared the platform, Pikachu, perched on his shoulder, let out a soft Pika. The moment Ash was within a few feet of the GS ball, it happened. A low hum filled the room, a resonant frequency that vibrated in Ash's teeth. On the diagnostic platform, the inert sphere began to glow. A soft, golden light pulsed from within, matching the rhythm of a slow heartbeat. The data streams on the monitor went wild. Professor! Hope exclaimed, her professional detachment shattering. Energy readings are off the charts. It's resonating with something. Ivy stared, her mind racing. She looked from the glowing ball to Ash, then back again. Her sharp eyes narrowed. "Get closer, Ash." He obeyed, placing his hand on the edge of the platform. The hum grew louder, and the light from the GS ball brightened, casting a warm, golden hue across his face. On the monitor, a new energy signature had appeared, one that was emanating from Ash himself. The two patterns were nearly identical. "Incredible," Ivy whispered, a thrill of discovery in her voice. "The ball isn't inert. It's locked. And you're the key." Charity looked at Ash with wide, amazed eyes. Faith pushed off the wall, her stance no longer relaxed but alert, her gaze fixed on the impossible event unfolding before her. Before Ivy could propose another test, a strident alarm blared through the laboratory, flashing red lights bathing the room in a panicked glow. "What is it?" Ivy demanded, her head snapping toward Hope's console. "Priority alert from the Valencia Port Authority." Hope reported, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. "A Garridos is on a rampage at the main pier. It's, stars above, the report says it's destroyed 2 freighters already. Officer Jenny is requesting immediate backup from any available trainers." "A rampage?" "Garridos are aggressive, but not typically this destructive without provocation," Ivy mused, her scientific mind already analyzing the new problem. "I'm going," Ash said, the decision made in an instant. He turned, Pikachu already sparking on his shoulder. "Ash, wait." Misty called, grabbing her Stereo's pokeball. "You can't go alone." "We'll all go," Ivy declared, grabbing a small case of emergency equipment. "Faith, secure the lab. Charity, Hope, you're with me. This could be more than just a simple rampage. I want data." When they arrived at the port, the scene was one of utter chaos. One end of the main pier was a splintered wreck, with cargo containers tossed about like building blocks. Panicked dockworkers and tourists were fleeing as a lone officer Jenny and her Blastoise tried desperately to hold the line. And then Ash saw it. The Garridos was magnificent and terrifying. It thrashed in the harbor, its colossal body whipping the water into a frenzy. But something was horribly wrong. Its eyes, normally filled with primal rage, were glowing with a sickening, black, oily light. A visible aura of the same dark energy, like ink bleeding into water, pulsed around its body. When it roared, the sound was distorted, filled with an unholy agony. It unleashed a hyper beam, but the beam was tinged with the same black corruption, and it didn't just explode on impact, it seemed to rot the very air it passed through, leaving a trail of withered decay. "What is that energy?" Tracy breathed, his sketchbook forgotten in his hands. "I've never seen anything like it," Ivy said, her voice grim. She was already using a handheld scanner, but its readings were erratic and nonsensical. "It's like anti-energy. A void." Blastoise fired a powerful hydro pump, but the water seemed to sizzle and evaporate against the dark aura before it could even touch the Garridos' scales. The corrupted sea serpent retaliated with a flick of its tail, sending a wave of dark pulped water that slammed into Blastoise, sending it flying back. "This isn't working." Officer Jenny shouted, her face pale. "It's like it's possessed." Ash felt it then. The same way he could feel Pikachu's joy or Bulbasaur's calm, he could feel the Garridos. But this was different. Beneath the layers of corrupted rage and dark influence, he felt a core of pure, unadulterated pain. The creature wasn't evil. It was a victim, screaming for help in a language no one else could understand. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that fighting it would be pointless. You couldn't punch a sickness. You had to cure it. "Everyone, stand back," Ash said, his voice ringing with a newfound authority that cut through the panic. "Ash, are you crazy?" Misty yelled, grabbing his arm. "Its hyper beam is tearing through solid steel." He turned to her, and the look in his eyes stopped her cold. It was the same look he'd had in the final moments of his battle with Drake, focused, absolute, and utterly confident. "It's in pain, Misty. I can feel it." Fighting will only make it worse. He gently removed her hand from his arm and walked forward, stepping past Officer Jenny and her struggling Blastoise. He walked to the edge of the broken pier, standing alone before the thrashing, corrupted Leviathan. Pikachu was a tense ball of muscle on his shoulder, ready to fight to the death for him. "It's okay, buddy," Ash murmured, his voice a soothing balm of sound. "We're not going to fight." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, reaching for the humming power inside him. He didn't summon it with desperation this time, but with purpose. He pictured the Gyarados not as a monster, but as the magnificent creature it was meant to be. He focused on the pain he felt from it, and projected his own desire to help, to heal, to soothe. The golden light bloomed. It didn't erupt from him this time. It flowed. A gentle, shimmering wave of pure, warm aura emanated from his body, spreading out across the water. It was visible to everyone on the pier, a soft, golden ripple in the air that seemed to push back the encroaching dread. The corrupted Gyarados roared as the light touched it, but the sound was different. It was less rage and more shock. The black, oily energy around its body recoiled from the golden light as if burned, hissing and retracting like a living thing. Ash took another step forward, his hand outstretched. "It's all right," he said, his voice calm and steady, projecting his feelings with the light. "Let me help you. You don't have to be afraid anymore." The Gyarados thrashed one last time, a final, violent spasm against the encroaching calm. The black energy condensed, lashing out at Ash like a shadowy whip. Pikachu screeched, ready to intercept, but Ash didn't even flinch. The whip of darkness dissolved into nothingness a foot from his face, unable to exist within the purity of his projected aura. He held his ground, pouring more of his energy into the golden wave. He felt a connection form, a link between his mind and the tortured consciousness of the Gyarados. He pushed feelings of peace, safety, and calm through that link, a direct assault of empathy against the parasitic darkness. Slowly, miraculously, the thrashing began to subside. The terrible, black glow in the Gyarados' eyes flickered and dimmed. With a final, shuddering sigh that seemed to echo across the entire harbor, the last of the oily energy evaporated from its body, vanishing like smoke in the wind. The Gyarados blinked, its eyes clear and intelligent once more. It was exhausted, its body covered in self-inflicted wounds, but it was free. It lowered its massive head, its snout coming to rest just a few feet from Ash. It looked at him, not with rage, but with a deep, profound gratitude. It let out a low, rumbling cry, a sound of thanks, before sinking peacefully beneath the waves and disappearing into the deep. The golden light around Ash faded, leaving him swaying on the spot. The effort had cost him, leaving him feeling hollowed out and dizzy. Pikachu scampered down his arm to lean against his leg, offering support. The pier was utterly silent. Officer Jenny, Misty, Tracy, the dockworkers, everyone stared, mouths agape, at the spot where the monster had been, and then at the boy who had tamed it not with force, but with light. Professor Ivy lowered her scanner, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated astonishment. The readings she had just witnessed were not of this world. They were the stuff of myths, of legends. A boy who could command a power that pacified monsters and erased an energy that defied physics. Charity had her hands clasped over her heart, tears in her eyes. Hope was staring at her data pad, which was flashing the words, unknown energy type, benign. Analysis impossible. Faith's piercing gaze on Ash was no longer one of assessment. It was one of awe. Of respect. The kind a soldier gives a commander who has just won an impossible victory. Later, back in the pristine quiet of the lab, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions. Misty and Tracy were tending to Ash, who was sipping a nutrient-rich drink Charity had prepared for him. He was pale but his breathing was steady. Professor Ivy stood before a large holographic display, which showed two swirling energy patterns. One was a chaotic, black vortex labeled, Gyarados contaminant. The other was a stable, golden spiral labeled, Ash Ketchum, aura output. "It's all connected," Ivy said, breaking the silence. Her voice was filled with a new, fervent intensity. She turned to face the room, her eyes locking onto Ash. The GS Ball's reaction to you. The dark energy that possessed that Gyarados. And your ability, your aura, as the ancient texts call it. It's the direct counter. Light to shadow. She paced the room, her mind working at a furious pace. For years, I have been a woman of science. Of data and repeatable results. What I saw today, what you did today, Ash, goes beyond that. This isn't just a regional phenomenon. That dark energy, it felt ancient. Predatory. And it was drawn to life, to a powerful creature like Gyarados. She stopped directly in front of him. My work has been to study the rare and unknown aspects of the Pokémon world. I thought the GS Ball was the extent of it. I was wrong. The GS Ball is just a piece of the puzzle. You are the centerpiece. Her eyes burned with purpose. My research can no longer be confined to this laboratory. It would be like trying to study a hurricane from a single weather station 1,000 miles away. The research must be mobile. It must follow the storm. It must follow the epicenter. She took a breath, her decision made. Ash Ketchum, my team and I are joining you. The declaration hung in the air, stunning everyone into silence. What? Misty finally sputtered. You're just, packing up and coming with us. Precisely, Ivy stated, as if it were the most logical conclusion in the world. Charity, prepare our mobile research vessel and transfer all essential data and supplies. Hope, begin plotting a course for the Johto region, ancient texts on aura phenomena are most prevalent there. Faith, you will oversee the logistics and our security. We leave within the hour. Her 3 assistants didn't question it for a second. Charity gave Ash another warm, encouraging smile. Looks like we're going to be seeing a lot more of each other. Hope simply nodded, already back at her console, her fingers a blur. Faith met Ash's gaze and gave a single, sharp nod. It was a pledge of allegiance. Ash looked from the determined face of Professor Ivy to her 3 capable assistants, then to the shocked expressions of Misty and Tracy. His life had been a series of adventures, of moving from one challenge to the next. But this felt different. This felt like a page had been torn out of his old life and he was starting a new book entirely. The Orange League was over. His victory had been a catalyst for something he couldn't possibly have imagined. He stood up, feeling his strength returning. He walked over to the diagnostic platform where the GS Ball still sat. He reached out and picked it up. In his hand, it gave a final, faint pulse of golden light before becoming inert once more, its secret kept for another day. He held the cool, smooth sphere, the weight of it a solid reality in his palm. And as he stood there, on the precipice of this new, unforeseen journey, he felt it for the first time. A flicker. A cold, distant pinprick in the vast, silent canvas of the world. It was a presence, an ancient, alien hunger that had been sleeping for eons. And now, thanks to the brilliant, golden light he had just broadcasted to the heavens, it was beginning to stir. It was aware of him. He looked out the great glass window of the lab, towards the setting sun and the endless ocean beyond. His team, his old friends and his new, formidable allies, were all looking at him, waiting for his lead. He wasn't just a trainer on his way to the next gym anymore. He was something else. A key. A beacon. And a target. His journey had just truly begun. Chapter 2, Whispers on the Sea. The decision, once made, was executed with the terrifying efficiency of a well-oiled machine. While Misty and Tracy were still processing the idea of a world-renowned professor and her team packing up their lives to follow Ash, Valencia Lab was already in motion. Faith's voice, crisp and commanding, echoed through the comms system as she directed a flurry of activity. Automated drones zipped through the halls, packing sensitive equipment into reinforced cases. Hope, Her face illuminated by the glow of a dozen holographic screens, orchestrated a massive data transfer, compressing years of research into encrypted, portable servers. Charity moved with a quiet grace, ensuring the lab's resident Pokémon were either comfortably secured for transport or released into designated safe zones on the island, her touch gentle and her voice a soothing murmur to each one. It was organized chaos, a stark contrast to Ash and Misty's usual travel preparations, which mostly consisted of stuffing everything into a backpack and arguing about which direction to walk. "I don't get it," Misty whispered to Ash, as they stood watching a crane lift a large, sealed container onto a flatbed transport. "She just decided. And they all just do it." Ash watched Faith direct the crane operator with precise hand signals, her focus absolute. He could feel the group's collective mindset, a unified current of purpose flowing from Ivy. There was no doubt, no hesitation. Just execution. "She's the professor," Ash replied, a simple statement that held a new weight. He was beginning to understand that Ivy's title wasn't just a job, it was a command. Their transport was a vessel named the Vanguard. It wasn't a luxury yacht or a rusty fishing trawler. It was a state-of-the-art mobile research platform, 150 feet of sleek, dark gray composite hull designed to be fast, quiet, and self-sufficient for months at a time. It had a reinforced prow for cutting through ice, advanced sonar and radar arrays, and a fully equipped laboratory where the main lab's central chamber would be. It even had a small, retractable helicopter pad and a submersible bay. It was a ship built for discovery, but Ash could see it was also a ship built for trouble. Within 2 hours of the decision, they were casting off from a private dock hidden in a secluded cove. The hum of the powerful, near-silent engines vibrated through the deck plates. Ash stood at the prow, the sea spray cool on his face, Pikachu on his shoulder. Misty and Tracy stood a few feet behind him, looking back at the shrinking silhouette of Valencia Island. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The beauty of it was undercut by the cold knot of apprehension in Ash's stomach. He could still feel that distant, hungry presence, a single dissonant note in the symphony of the world. It was faint, like a whisper at the edge of hearing, but it was there. And it was waiting. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Ash turned. Professor Ivy had joined him at the railing, her lab coat exchanged for a practical, high-collared naval jacket. The wind whipped strands of her purple hair across her face, but her sharp gaze was fixed on the horizon. "It is," Ash agreed. "Are you sure about this, Professor? Leaving your whole lab behind?" Ivy gave a small, wry smile. "My lab is not a building, Ash. It is a pursuit of knowledge. And right now, the most significant scientific discovery of the century is standing on the deck of my ship. My lab is right where it needs to be." She looked at him, her expression turning serious. "The question is, are you sure about this? Your life has just become infinitely more complicated. And more dangerous." "I've never really had a simple life, Professor," Ash said, his lips twisting into a familiar, confident grin. "And I don't run from a fight." Ivy studied him for a long moment. He felt her analytical gaze on him, but this time it wasn't just scientific curiosity. It was an assessment, a measure of the person she had just gambled her entire career on. She nodded slowly. "Good. Because I have a feeling you're in for the fight of your life." The first few days at sea established a new and complex rhythm. The Vanguard was a world unto itself, and Misty felt like a tourist who had wandered into a top-secret military base. Hope was perpetually stationed on the bridge, a space that looked more like a starship command center than a boat's helm. She was surrounded by a semicircle of monitors, her focus so absolute that she often seemed to forget to eat until Charity brought her a tray. Misty had tried to make conversation once, asking what all the screens were for. Hope had looked up, blinked as if noticing her for the first time, and said, "I'm cross-referencing global energy fluctuations with deep-sea topography to identify potential resonance points for the dark energy signature. Also, monitoring our stealth profile and running decryption algorithms on the corrupted data fragments from the Garridos incident. She then turned back to her screen, the conversation apparently over. Misty had slunk away, feeling about as useful as a Magikarp in a forest fire. Charity was her opposite, a constant source of warmth and activity. She managed the ship's medical bay, cared for the handful of Pokémon they'd brought with them, and acted as the group's social glue. She drew Misty into a conversation about water Pokémon breeding habits, her knowledge deep and her interest genuine. She listened intently as Tracy described the unique wing patterns of a passing Pelipper. She seemed to have an inexhaustible well of empathy, and Misty found her initial wariness and jealousy softening, much to her own annoyance. It was hard to dislike someone who was so genuinely kind. Faith was an entirely different matter. She was a silent, imposing presence, her days spent in a rigorous routine of physical training, weapons maintenance, and security patrols around the ship. She treated the voyage not as a research trip, but as a military deployment. Her Pokémon, a powerful and disciplined Mach-Hoke and a stoic Arcanine, trained with her, their drills precise and formidable. Misty found her place in her own familiar routine, training her Pokémon. She and her Starmie, Stereo, and Politoed spent hours by the ship's training pool, a section of the deck that could be flooded with seawater. Here, she was in her element. Here, she was a gym leader, a master of her craft, not just the tag-along friend. Ash, meanwhile, was undergoing his own transformation. The raw, untamed power he'd unleashed was a wild stallion, and he was learning to be its rider. He didn't spend his time in quiet meditation. His training was active, integrated into every part of his day. He stood on the open training deck, a space cleared for battle practice. Bulbasaur was in front of him, basking in the morning sun. Ash closed his eyes, not looking, but feeling. He reached out with his aura, not as a wave of power, but as a delicate probe. He could sense the intricate network of vines within Bulbasaur's bulb, the slow, steady process of photosynthesis, the deep, earthy contentment of the Pokémon. He felt a flicker of discomfort, a slight stiffness in Bulbasaur's right foreleg. "Bulbasaur, stretch out your right leg a bit more," Ash said, his eyes still closed. "You landed on it funny during that last dodge drill." "Bulba?" The seed Pokémon looked at him, confused, then tentatively stretched the indicated leg. A soft popping sound was heard, and it shifted its weight, its stance suddenly more comfortable. It looked back at Ash with renewed respect. Pikachu watched from the side, a proud look on his face. This was new. Ash had always understood them, but now, he knew. Later, Ash stood before Squirtle. The tiny turtle Pokémon was practically vibrating with pent-up energy, a common occurrence on the long sea voyage. Ash could feel it as a frantic, buzzing impatience. "All right, Squirtle, I know you're bored," Ash said. "Let's work on speed. Agility, full power, from that corner to this one." Squirtle grinned, happy for the action. Squirtle squirt. It crouched and shot off, a blue-shelled blur. As it moved, Ash focused his aura, not on himself, but on Squirtle. He didn't try to push it or force it. Instead, he visualized the path, clearing it of all resistance in his mind, projecting a feeling of frictionless, effortless speed directly into Squirtle's consciousness. Tracy, sketching nearby, gasped. Squirtle's agility was suddenly faster than he'd ever seen it. The movements were sharper, the turns more precise. It was as if the air itself was getting out of Squirtle's way. The Pokémon skidded to a halt in front of Ash, looking at its own body in surprise, as if it didn't quite believe how fast it had just moved. Ash, however, swayed, a hand going to his head. The effort left him breathless, a faint sheen of sweat on his brow. Enhancing another being, even slightly, took a significant toll. Impressive. The voice was low and firm. Faith stood by the bulkhead, having watched the entire display. She wore simple training gear, and her amber eyes were alight with a professional curiosity. "Your bond with your Pokémon has become a tangible weapon. But what about you? Ash straightened up, meeting her gaze. What about me? Your power enhances them, but you are the source. You are the command node. In a real fight, the enemy won't just target your Pokemon. They'll target you. You're slow, you're unprotected. You are the weak link. Her words were blunt, stripped of any sugarcoating. I can take care of myself, Ash countered, a defensive edge to his voice. Faith's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile. Show me. She moved before he could respond. She didn't lunge, she flowed. Her body was a study in economy of motion, closing the distance between them in an instant. She threw a quick, sharp jab aimed at his chest. Old Ash would have clumsily dodged or tried to block it. New Ash was different. He didn't see the punch coming with his eyes. He felt it. He felt the spike of intent from Faith, the coiled energy in her muscles, the trajectory of her fist plotted in his mind an instant before it launched. He didn't dodge. He simply shifted his weight, his torso moving just enough so the punch slid past his ribs, missing by a millimeter. Faith's eyes widened slightly in surprise. She didn't pause, transitioning smoothly into a low sweep kick aimed at his ankles. Again, Ash felt the intent. He hopped backward, the kick whistling through the air where his feet had just been. He wasn't thinking. He was reacting, his body moving in concert with the flow of aura that was now as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. Faith pressed her attack, a rapid-fire series of strikes and kicks. She was a master, her technique flawless. But she couldn't land a single clean blow. It was like trying to hit smoke. Ash weaved and swayed, his movements economical and precise, always exactly where her attacks weren't. He wasn't a brawler anymore. His aura was feeding him a constant stream of precognitive data, and his body was learning to trust it. Frustrated, Faith put more force into a spinning back fist, a move designed to break through a guard. Ash felt the surge of power. Instead of dodging, he stepped into the attack, dropping low. He slapped the inside of her rotating arm, not to hurt her, but to disrupt her balance, using her own momentum against her. She stumbled, her spin broken, and found herself off balance for the first time. In that split second of vulnerability, Ash could have struck. He could have swept her legs or landed a counterstrike. He didn't. He just stood there, his hand raised in a defensive posture, his breathing steady. Faith regained her footing, her chest rising and falling. She stared at him, her usual impassive mask replaced by genuine shock. How, she breathed. I've trained with black belts who couldn't read my movements that well. You have no formal training. Your stance is all wrong. But you knew where I was going to be. I just felt it, Ash said, shrugging, though the spar had left him energized, his senses singing. Faith's shock slowly morphed into a look of profound respect. She had tested him, and he had surpassed her expectations on a level she hadn't thought possible. She gave him a sharp, approving nod. Your instincts are a weapon. We need to hone them. Every morning. 0600 hours. Don't be late. She turned and walked away, leaving Ash with a newfound respect for the green-haired security chief. Their bond wasn't one of words or shared feelings. It was forged in the silent language of combat, a mutual understanding between two very different, but very capable, warriors. That night, Ash couldn't sleep. The day's training, the constant hum of the ship, the weight of their mission, it all churned in his mind. He left his small cabin and walked to the main deck, the cool night air a welcome relief. The sea was a vast, black mirror reflecting a spray of brilliant stars, and the only sound was the gentle hiss of the ship cutting through the water. He wasn't alone. Charity was leaning against the railing, looking out at the endless expanse. She wore a simple sweater, her pink hair a soft splash of color in the moonlight. She turned as he approached, offering a small, gentle smile. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. Too much on my mind, he admitted, joining her at the rail. Pikachu, who had followed him out, scampered onto the railing and stared out at the dark water. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, a rare commodity on the bustling ship. "You're worried," Charity said softly. It wasn't a question. Her empathy was so keen it was almost a form of mind reading. Ash sighed, the sound carried away by the wind. "This is all, a lot. That Gyarados, the way that dark energy felt. And that thing, that feeling out there in the dark. It's bigger than anything I've ever faced. Bigger than the Indigo League, bigger than Drake." "Of course it is," Charity said, her voice soothing. "You're not just fighting for a badge anymore, Ash. You're fighting for the world, whether you meant to or not." She turned to him, her eyes earnest. "But you're not fighting alone. You saw it in the lab. Professor Ivy, Hope, Faith, we work as one. And now, you, Misty, and Tracy are a part of that. We've got your back." "I know," Ash said. "It's just, why me? I'm just a kid from Pallet Town. I just wanted to be a Pokemon master." "Maybe being a Pokemon master is about more than just winning battles," Charity suggested. She reached out, her hand hovering over Pikachu. "May I?" Ash nodded. She gently stroked Pikachu's head, her touch so full of kindness that Pikachu, normally wary of strangers, leaned into it with a soft purr. "You love them," she said, looking from Pikachu back to Ash. "Not as tools, or as partners for a fight, but as family. I've spent my life studying and caring for Pokemon. I can see it. That love, that bond, maybe that's what this aura is. Maybe it's the power of that connection, made real." Her words resonated with him, striking a chord of truth deep inside. His strength didn't come from a desire to dominate. It came from his desire to protect, to stand with his friends. "I've always wanted to heal," Charity continued, her gaze turning back to the ocean. "Not just patch up wounds, but understand the pain behind them. Like with that Gyarados. While everyone else saw a monster to be fought, you saw a creature that was hurting. That's a rare gift, Ash." They talked for what felt like hours, their conversation drifting from his adventures to her work with Ivy, discovering a shared passion for the well-being of Pokemon that transcended trainer and caregiver. There was no pretense, no awkward flirting. It was a genuine connection, a meeting of two souls who understood a fundamental truth about the world. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the ocean, they found a small island of mutual understanding. Ash felt some of the tension in his shoulders finally begin to ease. He was so engrossed in their conversation that he almost missed it. A flicker. A wrongness. The quiet hum of the ship's engines suddenly felt, muted. The gentle sound of the waves seemed to dampen. Pikachu's ears shot up, and he let out a low growl, the fur on his back bristling. Ash's head snapped up, his aura flaring not with power, but with alarm. "Something's wrong." Just as he said it, a jarring alarm, shrill and urgent, shattered the night's tranquility. The ship's deck was suddenly bathed in rotating red emergency lights. "Bridge to all hands." Ivy's voice, tight and controlled, blasted from a nearby speaker. "Unidentified contacts, closing fast. Stealth profile is high-grade military. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill." Ash and Charity exchanged a wide-eyed look. The whispers on the sea had finally become a scream. Ash sprinted towards the center of the deck, Charity close behind him. The ship was already a hive of activity. Faith was on the upper deck, her Arcanine at her side, shouting orders into a headset as automated defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments in the ship's hull. "Hope, what have you got?" Faith's voice barked. "Two vessels, closing from port and starboard," Hope's voice replied over the comms, strained but steady. "They're running some kind of energy dampening field, it's playing havoc with our sensors. And they've just completely jammed our long-range communications. We're deaf and blind." Two sleek, black speedboats, cutting through the water with almost no wake, emerged from the darkness. They were sharp, angular, and utterly menacing. They flanked the vanguard, keeping pace. Figures clad in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by helmets, stood ready on their decks. This wasn't the bumbling theatricality of Team Rocket. This was cold, silent, and professional. "They're preparing to board," Faith yelled. Misty and Tracy ran onto the deck, their expressions a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Misty had her poke balls in hand. "What's going on? Who are they?" "No time." Ash shouted, his mind already in combat mode. He could feel the cold, disciplined intent of the attackers. They weren't here for plunder. They were here for him. For the GS ball. "Misty, we need to keep them off the ship. Tracy, get to the bridge with Ivy. Be her eyes and ears from up there." He didn't wait for a confirmation. He was already moving, Pikachu a golden streak of electricity on his shoulder. He felt the attacker's plan coalesce in his mind, a pincer movement, a synchronized boarding from both sides to overwhelm them. "Faith!" Ash yelled, pointing to the portside boat. "They're going to launch grapple lines in 5 seconds. Faith stared at him for a fraction of a second, then trusted his impossible warning. "Mac Hoke, Arcanine, port side. Intercept." As if on cue, a series of high-tension cables shot from the enemy boat. Faith's Arcanine, a blur of orange and black, leaped and snatched 2 lines out of the air with a fiery bite attack, melting them instantly. Mac Hoke, with its 4 powerful arms, grabbed another 2 and, with a tremendous heave, tore them loose from their moorings. On the other side, the second boat launched its own assault. "Misty, now!" Ash commanded. "Starmie, go! Rapid spin and water gun!" Misty roared, tossing the pokeball. Her star-shaped Pokémon emerged in a flash of light, its central gem glowing. It spun like a saw blade, deflecting incoming grapple hooks while unleashing a high-pressure jet of water that forced the boarders to take cover. The battle had begun. It was a chaotic, desperate defense. The attackers, who Ash now recognized as the fanatical cultists Ivy had warned about, Team Eclipse, were relentless. They used Pokémon perfectly suited for a naval assault. A Weevil darted across the water's surface using Ice Beam to create a slick path, its claws flashing. A pack of nimble Greninja used their incredible agility to try and leap onto the deck. On the bridge, Ivy was the conductor of their frantic orchestra. "Hope, their dampening field is fluctuating. Find the frequency and disrupt it. Tracy, I need visual confirmation on their heavy hitters. What are they deploying?" "I see a Bisharp on the starboard vessel's bow," Tracy reported, his voice tight, binoculars pressed to his eyes. "It looks like their squad leader. And the port side has an Aegis Lash." "Ash." Ivy's voice crackled in his ear from a calm bead Charity had pressed into his hand. "The Aegis Lash provides a defensive shield for their borders, and the Bisharp is their primary offensive threat. You have to break their formation." Ash didn't need to be told twice. He could feel the flow of the battle through his aura. He could feel Misty's Starmie starting to get overwhelmed by sheer numbers. He could feel Faith and her Machoke locked in a brutal close-quarters fight with 2 grunts and their powerful Scrafty. He was the linchpin. He had to be everywhere at once. "Pikachu, target the Weevil with Thunderbolt. Don't let it get a foothold," he yelled. A brilliant bolt of lightning shot from Pikachu's cheeks, forcing the speedy Pokémon to retreat. "Squirtle, I need you." Ash threw the ball. "Use Hydro Pump to sweep those Greninja off the side of the hull." Squirtle emerged and, with a determined cry, unleashed a torrent of water that blasted 3 of the clinging frog ninjas back into the sea. But for every one they repelled, another took its place. An Eclipse grunt finally made it onto the deck, his Absol landing silently beside him. The disaster Pokémon's horn glowed as it prepared to unleash a Psycho Cut aimed directly at an unsuspecting Misty. "Misty, right side. Ash yelled, his precognitive sense screaming a warning. Misty spun around just in time, her Politoed leaping forward to absorb the psychic blade with a defensive block. The warning had saved her from a devastating blow. She gave Ash a wide-eyed, grateful look before refocusing on her new opponent. The battle was a stalemate, and they were the defenders. A stalemate was a loss. Ash knew he had to do something decisive. He looked at the starboard boat, at the stern-faced leader with his imperious bisharp. That was the command node. Break it, and the rest might fall. Faith, cover me. Ash yelled, and then he did something no one expected. He ran towards the edge of the ship. Ash, what are you doing? Misty screamed. He didn't answer. He just ran, leaping onto the railing. For a split second, he was silhouetted against the flashing red lights, a boy and his Pokémon against the world. Then, he jumped. He landed on the back of his Lapras, which he had released in midair. The gentle giant let out a powerful cry, already understanding its trainer's intent. Lapras, full speed. Target that lead boat. They surged through the choppy, dark water, a lone raider charging the enemy command. The Bisharp's trainer pointed a commanding finger at them. The Bisharp leaped forward, its arm blades glowing with a metallic sheen, and used Iron Head, becoming a silver torpedo aimed right at them. Lapras, Ice Beam, now. Ash commanded. A stream of pure cold shot from Lapras's mouth, colliding with the charging Bisharp. The attack didn't stop it, but it slowed it down, encasing it in a thick layer of frost. The Bisharp shattered its icy prison, but its momentum was broken. It landed on the water just feet from them. Poised to strike. This was the moment. Ash felt the cold focus of the Eclipse leader, felt the vicious intent of the Bisharp. He focused his aura, not as a wave of calm, but as a razor-sharp lance of power, pouring it into his partner. Pikachu. Volt Tackle. Pikachu became a comet of pure electricity, leaping from Lapras's head with a furious cry. He was faster, stronger, his electrical field burning brighter than ever before, supercharged by Ash's aura. He didn't just hit the Bisharp. He detonated on it. The explosion of electricity and raw power sent a shockwave across the water, shorting out the lights on the enemy boat. The Bisharp was thrown backward, crashing into its trainer, both of them slamming into the boat's console and collapsing in a shower of sparks. With their leader down, the starboard assault faltered. He did it. Tracy yelled from the bridge. Focus. Ivy's voice cut through. Hope, now. Their field is down. Targeting their engine block. Hope yelled back. On the main deck, one of the Vanguard's turrets swiveled, locked on, and fired a single, precise pulse of concussive energy. It struck the second Eclipse boat's stern, and the engine died with a sickening crunch. The attack was broken. The remaining grunts, seeing their command and their support neutralized, made a swift, professional retreat, diving into the water to be picked up by their disabled but still floating vessel. In the sudden silence, the only sounds were the lapping of waves and the heavy breathing of the defenders. They had won. But Faith wasn't celebrating. "We have a prisoner," she called out. Her Machoke had one of the grunts in a four-armed grip. The man was struggling, but it was useless. They dragged him to the center of the deck. He was defiant, his eyes, visible through his shattered helmet visor, burning with a cold fire. "Who sent you?" Ivy demanded, approaching him, her face grim. "Who are you people?" The grunt spat on the deck. "You are the noise. The chaos. The flaw in creation. You cannot stop the coming silence." "What silence? What are you talking about?" Ash asked, stepping forward. He could feel the man's fanaticism, a devotion so absolute it bordered on madness. The grunt's burning gaze locked onto Ash. He saw the inert GS ball, which Ash had clipped securely to his belt before the fight. A flicker of ravenous hunger crossed the man's face. The light has a champion, he sneered. It matters not. The silent Lord will consume the noisy light. All will be cleansed. All will be peace. Glory to Malice. The name hung in the air, cold and alien. Malice. Before anyone could react, the grunt's eyes rolled back in his head. A faint tremor ran through his body, and he went limp in Mashoki's arms, a thin line of foam on his lips. Charity. Ivy called. Charity rushed forward, a medical scanner in her hand. She ran it over the unconscious man. Her face went pale. His vitals are plummeting. It's some kind of fast-acting neurotoxin. Self-induced. There's a hidden injector in his molar. She looked up, her expression horrified. I can't stop it. He's not dead, but his brain activity is almost zero. He's fallen into a deep, irreversible coma. The group stood on the damaged deck of the Vanguard, the unconscious fanatic a stark reminder of their victory's cost. They had a name for their enemy's god now, Malice. They had a glimpse of their ideology, a nihilistic crusade for a silent universe. And they knew, with chilling certainty, that their enemies were willing to die, or worse, for their cause. Ash looked out at the dark, empty ocean, the direction the surviving Eclipse boat had fled. The threat was no longer a vague feeling or a distant whisper. It had a face, an army, and a name. And they were just getting started. Chapter 3, The Sunken Temple of Silence. The aftermath of the attack was a tense, focused hum of activity. Under the cold, efficient glow of the ship's floodlights, Faith and her Machoke patched the gouges in the hull while Charity tended to the bruised and battered Pokémon, her touch gentle and her voice a low murmur of reassurance. Misty, her adrenaline fading into a weary anger, helped catalog the damage to the deck. The victory felt hollow, tainted by the chilling fanaticism of their attackers. The comatose Eclipse grunt was secured in the medical bay, a living testament to the depths of their enemy's devotion. He was a puzzle Ivy couldn't solve, a body without a mind. The bridge of the Vanguard had become a war room. Ash stood beside Ivy, his arms crossed as he stared at a holographic map of the Johto coastline. Hope, fueled by what seemed to be a diet of pure caffeine and determination, was dissecting the data they'd salvaged from the brief window when the enemy's systems were vulnerable. They were professionals, Hope said, her voice tight. Her fingers danced across a holographic interface, pulling apart lines of code. The encryption on their comms was military-grade, but their navigation software was sloppy. A last-minute addition. They weren't expecting a direct confrontation. They were a snatch-and-grab team. They were after the GS ball, Ash stated, his hand instinctively going to the sphere clipped to his belt. It felt cold and silent, a sleeping giant. And you, Ivy added, her sharp eyes on him. The grunt's last words were clear. The light has a champion. They know about your aura. They might not understand it, but they know you are the key to whatever they're trying to prevent, or cause. Hope's screen beeped. I've got something. A new image appeared on the main display, a series of faint energy trails, like ghost-like breadcrumbs on the vast oceanic map. I cross-referenced the unique energy signature of their dampening field with deep-range sonar pings. Their ships didn't just appear out of nowhere. They came from a single point of origin and dispersed. And that point is, right here. She highlighted a spot on the map, a few dozen miles off the coast of a rugged, uninhabited stretch of shoreline between Cyanwood City and the Whirl Islands. There was nothing there. Just open, deep water. There are no islands at those coordinates, Tracy said, peering at the map from his station where he was sketching the Eclipse boat's design from memory. Not on the surface, Ivy murmured, her mind already several steps ahead. She brought up a bathymetric chart of the seafloor. The image resolved into a detailed 3D rendering of the ocean bottom. Right at the coordinates Hope had identified, a massive, anomalous structure rose from the abyssal plain, a submerged plateau crowned with what looked like the distinct, geometric shapes of unnatural, man-made ruins. An archaeological find of this magnitude would be headline news. This place isn't on any public record. It's been deliberately hidden. What is it? Misty asked, having just entered the bridge. A temple, by the looks of it, Ivy said, zooming in on the holographic model. Ancient. Pre-modern. And given what we know, it's a safe bet it wasn't built to worship Arceus. Ash stared at the sunken ruins, a cold feeling creeping up his spine. He could almost feel it, a faint echo of the same oppressive energy that had corrupted the Garridos. It was a place of power for them. A source. That's where they're based, he said with certainty. Or at least, it's important to them. It's a nexus, Ivy agreed. A place where the barrier between our world and, whatever malice is thin. The energy readings, even filtered through miles of water, are consistent with the contaminant we saw before. That place is leaking. A plan began to form, unspoken but understood by everyone on the bridge. They couldn't wait for the next attack. They couldn't run. They had to go to the source. A submersible expedition is our only option, Ivy declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. Hope, what's the pressure and visibility at that depth? Crushing, Hope replied without looking up. N0. It's pitch black. We'll be entirely dependent on the sub-systems. We can't all go, Faith's voice cut in as she stepped onto the bridge, wiping grease from her hands with a rag. Her presence was a solid anchor of pragmatism. The Vanguard would be a sitting duck up here if Team Eclipse has patrols. I'll stay. I'll run a defensive perimeter with Arcanine and Machhoke. I'll stay with you, Misty said immediately. My water Pokémon are best suited for defending the ship from the surface. Her jaw was set. It wasn't just a practical decision, it was a statement. She was a gym leader, a guardian. Her domain was the water's surface, and she would defend it. Ash met her eyes and saw the fierce determination there. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her strength and her choice. My observation skills are best used up here as well, Tracy added. I can monitor sonar and help Faith spot any approaching threats. So the away team was decided. It would be Ash, the key, Ivy, the scientist, Charity, the medic and support, and Hope, the only one qualified to pilot the highly advanced submersible. The vessel, christened the Nautilus, was a compact, rugged four-person sub designed for deep-sea exploration. As Hope ran through the pre-dive checklist, her voice a calm, professional monotone reciting pressure ratings and oxygen levels, the atmosphere inside the cramped cockpit was thick with tension. Charity double-checked a case of medical supplies and emergency rations, her usual warm smile replaced by a focused resolve. Ash sat in the co-pilot seat, Pikachu in his lap. The little mouse was uncharacteristically quiet, his senses on high alert. Ash clipped his active Pokémon, Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charizard, to a specialized harness. The sub was equipped with external deployment pods that would allow him to release them outside, where they would be protected by a localized, life-supporting energy field projected by the sub itself. It was experimental tech Ivy had been developing, and it was about to get a field test in the most hostile environment imaginable. All systems green. Sealing main hatch, Hope announced. With a heavy hiss and a solid thud, the world outside was sealed away. They were in a metal bubble, about to descend into the abyss. Nautilus, this is Vanguard, Faith's voice crackled over the comms. You are clear for launch. We have the con. Good hunting. Acknowledged, Vanguard, Ivy replied. See you on the other side. Hope, take us down. The submersible bay flooded, and with a gentle lurch, the Nautilus detached from its moorings. The powerful external lights cut through the murky water, illuminating a world of blue that quickly darkened to indigo, then to a perfect, suffocating black. The only light was their own. The pressure gauge on the wall crept steadily higher, a silent, menacing reminder of the weight of the ocean above them. Passing 1,000 meters, Hope reported, her eyes glued to her instruments. 2,000. Hull integrity is at 100%. Outside the reinforced viewport, strange, bioluminescent creatures drifted past like alien ghosts in the dark. It was another world, silent and strange. But as they descended deeper, Ash began to feel it. A creeping dread. A psychic pressure that had nothing to do with the water. It was a low, constant hum of malevolence, pressing in on the sub, on his mind. His Pokémon felt it too, he could sense their growing unease. "Professor, do you feel that?" Ash asked, his voice low. Ivy, who was monitoring a suite of energy sensors, nodded grimly. "The dark energy readings are climbing exponentially. It's affecting the water's composition on a molecular level. It's wrong." Charity was pale, one hand pressed to her temple. "It feels empty. Cold. Like all the life is being squeezed out of the world." Even Hope, ever the stoic, shivered slightly. "The sub's internal atmospheric sensors are detecting anomalous psychic interference. I'm filtering it, but it's strong." The temple materialized out of the darkness, a breathtaking and horrifying sight. It was a sprawling complex of black, basalt-like stone, carved with impossible geometry. The architecture was sharp, angular, and aggressive, seeming to stab upward at the crushing weight of the ocean. No algae or coral grew on its surfaces, the stone was unnaturally clean, as if life itself recoiled from it. A faint, sickly purple light emanated from the temple's heart, pulsing in time with the malevolent hum that now saturated the water. "By all the gods," Ivy breathed, her scientific curiosity warring with a primal sense of dread. "There's an entrance," Hope said, her voice tight, pointing to a massive, arch-like opening large enough for the sub to pass through. "It looks like a hangar bay. The energy readings are strongest from inside." As they guided the sub into the opening, the oppressive feeling intensified tenfold. The water inside the structure was still and dead. Great, silent halls stretched into the darkness, decorated with carvings that seemed to writhe at the edge of their vision. They depicted scenes of cosmic destruction, of stars being extinguished and worlds dissolving into nothingness. "This place is a monument to nihilism," Ivy murmured, her face grim. They navigated the submerged corridors until they reached a vast central chamber. In the middle of it, floating in defiance of all physics, was a crystalline obelisk, pulsing with that same sickly purple light. This was the source. The artifact. A colossal amplifier for Malice's influence. And they weren't alone. Several figures in Team Eclipse's black gear were arrayed around the obelisk. They weren't wearing bulky diving suits, instead, a shimmering field of dark energy, a twisted mockery of the sub's life support field, protected them from the pressure and provided breathable air. They were performing some kind of ritual, chanting in a low, guttural language as they channeled energy into the artifact. With each pulse, the malevolent hum intensified, and Ash could feel the very fabric of the area growing weaker, more corrupt. "They're trying to create a permanent rift," Ivy realized with horror. "To turn this whole region into a dead zone for their master. We have to stop them," Ash said, his voice hard as steel. He turned to Hope. "Can you get the deployment pods open?" "On it," she said, her fingers flying. "Charity, stay with Hope. Keep the sub safe," Ash commanded. He looked at Ivy. "Professor, I need you out there with me. I need your eyes." Ivy didn't hesitate. She grabbed a waterproof data pad. "Let's go." The external hatches slid open. Ash took a deep breath, focused his aura, and projected a shimmering golden field of life-sustaining energy around himself and Ivy, pushing back the crushing pressure and the dead water. They stepped out of the sub onto the temple floor, the contrast between his warm, golden light and the temple's cold. Purple gloom stark and immediate. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. The chanting stopped. The Eclipse grunts turned, their helmeted faces registering shock, then fury. "The Lightbringer," one of them snarled, his voice distorted by his helmet speaker. "He dares profane the sanctum of silence. Destroy him." Their Pokémon materialized around them, a menacing Crawdaunt, a spectral Dusknoir, and a vicious Sharpedo, all of their eyes glowing with the same corrupt energy as the Gyarados. Charizard, Bulbasaur, Squirtle. Let's go! Ash roared. His 3 Pokémon appeared in flashes of light, protected by the sub's energy field emitters. They were disoriented for a moment by the bizarre underwater environment, but their trust in Ash was absolute. Charizard let out a bellow of defiance, a gout of fire erupting from his mouth. The flames, sustained by the energy field, burned with an almost holy light in the oppressive darkness. The battle was immediate and surreal. It was a chaotic, three-dimensional fight in the dead silence of the abyss. Charizard, a creature of fire and air, battled a ghostly Dusknoir in the freezing, crushing depths. His flamethrower, empowered by Ash's ambient aura, was a pure expression of life and energy, and it was the only thing that seemed to truly harm the spectral Pokémon. Squirtle, completely in his element, became a spinning cannonball of a turtle, his skull bash and rapid spin deflecting the savage attacks of the corrupted Sharpedo. Bulbasaur, the most grounded of his team, stood his ground on the temple floor, his vines lashing out like whips. He caught the Crawdaunt's legs, slamming the brutish Pokémon against the temple walls. Ash was the nexus of the battle. He wasn't just shouting commands. He was a conductor, his aura a web of light connecting him to his Pokémon. He fed them strength, anticipated enemy attacks, and coordinated their movements with a thought. Charizard, left flank. It's phasing. Squirtle, evade, then counter. Bulbasaur, leech seed now. Drain its corrupt energy. Ivy was at his side, her mind a whirlwind of analysis. She wasn't a brawler, but her intellect was a weapon. Ash, the artifact is polarizing their energy. They draw strength from it. Their Pokémon's attacks have a necrotic property that bypasses conventional defenses. You have to focus on severing their connection to it. While his Pokémon fought, Ash focused on the Eclipse grunts themselves. He couldn't attack them directly, but he could do something else. He extended his aura, not as a weapon, but as a disruptive wave of pure, living energy. He targeted the shimmering fields of darkness that protected them. The golden light of his aura washed over them, and the dark fields flickered and sputtered like dying flames. One of the grunts screamed as his field collapsed. The full, crushing pressure of the deep ocean hit him in an instant. His suit imploded with a sickening crunch. His 2 companions recoiled in horror, their concentration broken. That was the opening Ash needed. All of you, now. Full power, he yelled. Charizard unleashed a furious dragon rage, Squirtle a full-force hydro pump, and Bulbasaur a concentrated solar beam, fed by the light of Charizard's fire and Ash's own aura. The combined assault, perfectly synchronized, overwhelmed the remaining corrupted Pokémon, knocking them out in a single, decisive blow. The 2 remaining grunts, their protective fields failing, scrambled backward, trying to reach the obelisk. But it was too late. One of them, in a last act of spite, activated a device on his wrist. The temple is a tomb. If we cannot claim it, we will bury you in it, he shrieked. Deep, groaning sounds echoed through the chamber. Cracks began to spiderweb across the ancient stone walls. The entire structure was destabilizing. At the same time, the Eclipse grunt nearest the obelisk made a final, desperate move. He placed his hands on the pulsing crystal, pouring the last of his energy into it. A beam of pure, black energy shot from the obelisk, not at Ash, but at Ivy. It happened in a heartbeat. Ivy, engrossed in her readings, was completely exposed. There was no time to dodge. Ash didn't think. He reacted. He threw himself in front of her, a human shield. But he knew his body couldn't stop the beam. So he did the only thing he could. He erupted. He unleashed a massive, uncontrolled torrent of his aura, a brilliant, golden supernova of power. It met the black beam head-on. For a moment, light and shadow warred, a violent explosion of conflicting energies that shook the very foundations of the temple. The golden light won, shattering the dark beam and continuing onward, slamming into the eclipse grunt and the obelisk behind him. The grunt was vaporized. The ancient artifact cracked, the purple light within it flickering and dying. The effort cost him everything. The world dissolved into a dizzying gray vortex. The last thing he saw before he blacked out was a massive stone pillar, dislodged by the explosion, toppling directly towards Ivy. He woke to a gentle, rhythmic beeping and the soft pressure of a cool cloth on his forehead. He was in the small medical bay, which was really just a single bunk with advanced monitoring equipment. Charity was beside him, her face a mask of worried concentration as she checked the readings on a screen. What happened?" he rasped, his throat dry. Charity's head snapped up, and a wave of relief washed over her face. "Ash. You're awake. Oh, thank goodness." "Ivy, the pillar, she's fine," a voice said from the doorway. Ivy stood there, looking pale and shaken, but unharmed. She held a steaming mug in her hands. "You saved me. Before you passed out, you projected a shield. A solid wall of light. It caught the pillar." She walked over and handed the mug to him. It was a warm, nutrient-rich broth. "Drink. Your energy levels are dangerously low." Ash took the mug, his hands trembling. He remembered a flash of golden light, a desperate, final act of will to protect her. "The temple," he asked, "is currently collapsing in on itself." Hope's voice came over the internal comm. "I'm navigating us out through a ventilation shaft I found on the schematics Ivy downloaded. It's going to be tight." They had won. They had defeated the Eclipse team and, more importantly, broken their connection to this place. But as Ash lay there, sipping the warm broth, he felt the immense toll the victory had taken. His body ached with a profound exhaustion that went bone deep. Using his aura on that scale had nearly burned him out from the inside. Ivy sat on the edge of the bunk, her professional demeanor gone, replaced by something softer, something far more personal. She looked at the boy who had, without a second's hesitation, thrown himself in front of a lethal energy beam for her, who had then used the last of his strength to shield her from being crushed. "Thank you, Ash," she said, her voice quiet but heavy with emotion. Her hand rested on his arm, her touch surprisingly gentle. "My life is dedicated to observing and analyzing phenomena. I have never been a part of one. Until today. You are truly remarkable." It wasn't the praise of a scientist for a test subject. It was the gratitude of one person to another who had saved their life at great personal cost. In the silent, cramped confines of the submersible, fleeing a collapsing 2 miles beneath the ocean, a new bond was forged between the prodigal scholar and the boy with the heart of a son. It was a bond built not on intellectual curiosity, but on sacrifice and a shared glimpse into the abyss. "Everyone, brace." Hope's voice suddenly commanded. "This is it." The sub scraped against rock, the sound of screeching metal setting their teeth on edge. They were thrown against the walls as Hope expertly maneuvered the vessel through the narrow escape route. And then, with a final lurch, they were free. They shot out of the temple's side, the shockwave of the final implosion hot on their tail, pushing them toward the surface. As they ascended, leaving the dead, silent temple to its eternal grave, Ash looked at Ivy, at Charity's relieved face, and thought of Hope at the controls. He had made the choice to destroy the artifact, trusting his team to get them out alive. And they had. They all had. The weight of his power was immense, but for the first time, he felt he wasn't carrying it alone. He had a team. A family. And they were stronger together than any temple of darkness. Chapter 4, The Politics of Prophecy. The world felt blessedly, gloriously bright. Ash stood on the deck of the Vanguard as it slid into a reserved berth in Goldenrod City's bustling port, the midday sun warming his face. After the crushing, silent darkness of the deep, the vibrant chaos of the city was a balm to his soul. The air was filled with the sounds of ship horns, the cries of wind gull, and the distant rumble of the magnet train. For the first time in days, the oppressive psychic static of Malice's influence was gone, replaced by the lively, chaotic hum of a million lives being lived all at once. His body still ached with a profound, soul-deep weariness. The massive expenditure of aura in the sunken temple had left him feeling hollowed out, his inner well almost dry. Charity had confined him to bed rest for 2 days, plying him with nutrient-rich broths and stern admonishments not to run his engine in the red. His sparring sessions with Faith were on hold, replaced by light stretches and breathing exercises that felt more like physical therapy. Even his connection to his Pokémon felt muted, the usually clear symphony of their emotions now a distant echo. He was recovering, but it was slow. Their mission in Goldenrod was twofold. First, as per Hope's recommendation, they were to meet with a man named Kenjiro Takeda, a semi-retired historian and mythologist renowned for his expertise in Johto's ancient legends. Ivy theorized that the myths surrounding the legendary beasts, Reiku, Entei, and Suicune, and their connection to the brass and tin towers might hold clues about the nature of aura and its historical opposition. Second, they needed to resupply and make repairs. The battle with Team Eclipse and the narrow escape from the collapsing temple had left their mark on the vanguard. As they disembarked, dressed in inconspicuous civilian clothes, the difference in their group was palpable. Misty and Tracy, who had endured a tense but uneventful watch over the ship, were relieved to be on solid ground. Ivy, Charity, and Hope, however, moved with a quiet, watchful tension, their eyes scanning the crowds, their senses on high alert. They had been to the abyss and back. The world no longer looked the same to them. Takeda's residence is in the historic district near the radio tower, Ivy said, looking at a map on her data pad. Hope, you and Faith will oversee the resupply and coordinate with the shipyard engineers. The rest of us will go see the professor. Understood, Faith said, her amber eyes sweeping over the port, already identifying potential threats and escape routes. We'll maintain radio contact. Stay sharp. As they made their way through the city's wide, clean streets, Ash felt a sense of unease that had nothing to do with ancient evils. People were staring. Not at the whole group, but at him. Whispers followed them, and he saw more than a few people pointing, their faces alight with recognition. Is that? It's him. The Orange League champion. Ash Ketchum. He's here in Goldenrod. The news of his victory had spread far and wide. He was a celebrity, a fact he'd never had to contend with on the remote islands of the Orange Archipelago. He tried to ignore it, pulling the brim of his hat lower, but it was no use. A kid, no older than 10, ran up to him, his eyes wide. You're Ash. I saw your battle with Drake on TV. Your Pikachu was amazing. Can I have your autograph? Ash, taken aback, managed a small smile and signed the boy's notebook. But the incident drew more attention. A small crowd started to form. All right, that's enough, Ivy said, her voice low and firm. She subtly maneuvered herself between Ash and the growing group of onlookers. Let's pick up the pace. They ducked into a side street, their path to the historian's house becoming a mild evasion. The fame was an unexpected complication, a new kind of exposure they didn't need. Professor Takeda lived in a traditional-style house, a serene oasis of dark wood, paper screens, and meticulously raked gravel gardens tucked away behind a high wall. He was an elderly man with a kind, wrinkled face and eyes that twinkled with a sharp, enduring intellect. He greeted them with a polite bow, ushering them into a room overlooking a tranquil koi pond. Professor Ivy, an honor, he said, his voice a gentle rasp. Your work on Pokémon ecosystems is required reading. And you must be the young heroes of the hour. Your names have been making waves, far beyond the sports pages. Ivy got straight to the point, laying out a carefully edited version of their situation. She spoke of a resurgent, ancient energy, a fanatical cult, and the unique properties of the GS ball. She presented the data from the Garridos incident and the energy readings from the sunken ruins. She was careful to frame Ash's abilities as a unique bioresonance, avoiding the more mystical term aura for now. Takeda listened patiently, his fingers steepled, his gaze thoughtful. He didn't seem surprised or skeptical. When Ivy finished, he took a long sip of his tea. Your bioresonance and this dark energy, they are not new to this world, he said softly. They are the oldest story there is. The story of light and shadow, creation and dissolution. Our ancestors didn't have your scientific language, so they called it aura and malice. The spirit of life versus the hunger of the void. He stood and slid open a paper screen, revealing a wall lined with ancient scrolls. He carefully selected one, unrolling it on the low table. It was a faded, delicate ink painting depicting a swirling, chaotic battle. In the center, a figure cloaked in golden light stood against a formless, terrifying mass of shadow. This scroll is over 1,000 years old, Takeda explained. It tells the legend of the first guardian, a human who could channel the life force of the world to push back the encroaching silence. He wasn't a king or a warrior. He was a simple man who loved the world and its creatures so fiercely that the world itself gave him a weapon to defend it. Ash stared at the painted figure, at the golden light pouring from its hands. It was an echo of what he had done, a story from a forgotten age that was suddenly his own. These guardians, Takeda continued, were rare, appearing only in times of great need. The legends say their power was a beacon, and that by its very nature, it would draw the attention of the shadow it sought to fight. It is a terrible, lonely burden. Before he could elaborate further, the serene atmosphere was shattered by a firm, insistent knocking at the front gate. Takeda's brow furrowed. He wasn't expecting other visitors. A moment later, his young assistant slid the door open, his face pale and nervous. Master Takeda, it's the Pokémon League. The Regional Security Division. Standing in the entryway, framed by the doorway like figures of judgment, were two people. One was a uniformed officer. The other was a tall, imposing man with graying temples, a face set in grim, unyielding lines, and a uniform so sharply pressed it looked like it could cut glass. He radiated an aura of absolute, by-the-book authority. Professor Takeda, the man said, his voice a low baritone that commanded attention. I am Commander Ironwood of the Pokémon League Internal Affairs and Security Division. I apologize for the intrusion, but we have reason to believe you are harboring fugitives. His cold eyes swept over the room, dismissing Ivy and her team before landing, with laser-like intensity, on Ash. Ash Ketchum, Ironwood stated, his voice flat and accusatory. You are to come with us. By order of the Johto League Committee, you are to be placed under protective custody, and that artifact, he gestured to the GS ball on Ash's belt, is to be confiscated pending a full security review. Ash felt a jolt of alarm, but he kept his expression neutral. He could feel the unbending will of the man, the rigid adherence to protocol. This wasn't an enemy like Team Eclipse. This was the law. Fugitives. Ivy stepped forward, her posture radiating an icy indignation. Commander, I am Professor Ivy, and this is my research team. We are here on official business, consulting with Professor Takeda. On what grounds are you making these accusations? Ironwood produced a data pad and swiped his thumb across it. A holographic image appeared in the air between them, a satellite photo of the ocean, a massive disturbance visible on the surface. Approximately 36 hours ago, a seismic event of unknown origin was detected at these coordinates. The event coincided with the complete disappearance of a previously uncharted submarine structure. A structure that, according to our intelligence, you and your vessel were the last to approach. He swiped again, showing a blurry, long-range photo of the Vanguard near the site. You were present at the destruction of a major archaeological and, potentially, strategic site. You have failed to report this incident. You are also traveling with an unclassified and potentially dangerous artifact. That is more than enough grounds. This was a nightmare. Their victory at the temple had put them on the wrong side of the law. They looked guilty as sin. Commander, what you're failing to understand is that we prevented a disaster, Ash said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, steady, cutting through the tension. He knew losing his temper would be disastrous. That place was a threat. The people there were trying to unleash something that would have devastated this entire region. People? Ironwood's eyebrow arched. Our deep-range scans found no evidence of other personnel, living or dead. Only your submersible leaving the collapse zone. As far as our evidence shows, you destroyed that site, and you are the sole survivor. Ash's blood ran cold. Team Eclipse hadn't just been professionals. They were ghosts. They knew how to clean up their own messes, how to make it look like they were never there. The imploded suit, the vaporized grunt, there was no evidence. It was their word against a mountain of damning circumstantial evidence. Commander, you are operating on incomplete data, Ivy insisted, her voice sharp as glass. If you would just allow me to present our findings, your findings can be presented during your formal debriefing at League headquarters, Ironwood cut her off. My orders are not a request. Surrender the boy and the artifact. Now. The uniformed officers behind him shifted, their hands moving towards their pokeballs. The air grew thick with the promise of violence. Charizard's pokeball twitched on Ash's harness, the Pokémon inside sensing his trainer's agitation, ready to burn the whole house down on his command. Ash placed a calming hand on it. Escalating this would be a catastrophic mistake. He had to outthink this man, not overpower him. He met Ironwood's gaze, his own eyes clear and unwavering. And what do you think will happen then, Commander? Ash asked, his tone reasonable, almost conversational. You'll lock me in a cell and put the GS ball in a vault. And the people who are actually responsible for all this, the ones who are trying to turn the world into a graveyard, will be free to continue their work. You won't see them coming until it's too late. You'll be following protocol while the world ends around you. Ironwood's jaw tightened. The Pokémon League is more than capable of handling any threat. Are you? Ash challenged, taking a small step forward. You didn't know that Temple existed until it was gone. You don't know who Team Eclipse is. You don't know what malice is. You're trying to solve a problem you don't even understand. All you have are suspicions and a rulebook. I have the truth. His confidence was absolute. It wasn't arrogance, it was the simple, unshakable certainty of a man who had looked into the void and returned. He wasn't explaining his power, he was demonstrating its effect on him. His clarity, his command of the situation, his refusal to be intimidated, it was all a product of the aura that now defined him. The standoff was broken by an unexpected voice. Commander Ironwood. Professor Takeda, who had been watching the entire exchange with quiet intensity, spoke up. This boy and his companions are under my protection, as guests in my home. To take them by force would be a great dishonor. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Takeda was not just a historian, he was a respected cultural figure in Johto. Forcing his hand would be a political disaster for Ironwood. Furthermore, Takeda continued, I have been in contact with a colleague. A man I believe you know. Professor Samuel Oak. At the mention of Oak's name, Ironwood's expression flickered for the first time. Professor Oak corroborates their story, Takeda said. He confirms that Ash Ketchum is operating on his authority to investigate the GS ball and related phenomena. He is prepared to stake his considerable reputation on this young man's integrity. It was a masterstroke. Takeda had bought them cover, leveraging the reputation of the world's most respected Pokémon professor. Ironwood was caught between his orders and the political fallout of arresting a hero endorsed by both a cultural icon and a scientific legend. While the tense negotiation played out in the historian's house, another battle was being fought in the digital world. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Hope sat in the dark, her face illuminated by cascading lines of code. The moment they had docked, she had begun weaving a web of digital security around them, anticipating trouble. Her instincts had been right. Her systems had flagged it moments ago, a subtle, sophisticated intrusion into the Goldenrod Port Authority's network. It was a ghost, leaving almost no trace, targeting the docking logs and surveillance archives related to the Vanguard. It wasn't a brute force attack from the League, it was the delicate, precise work of a scalpel. Team Eclipse. Hope's fingers flew across her keyboard, her own code a countercurrent against the enemy's. She wasn't trying to block them. That would be too noisy, and they would know they'd been detected. Instead, she was redirecting them, feeding them a corrupted, looped data stream that showed the ship quiet and dormant. She was hiding in plain sight, making their real-time activity invisible while she traced the signal back to its source. The trace led her to a high-end data relay hub in the city's commercial district. They were close. And they were bold. They were likely planning another attempt to steal the GS ball, using the chaos of the League's investigation as cover. She opened a secure comms channel to Faith. They're in the city's network. Trying to get a lock on us. I think they're planning a physical breach. Tonight. Faith's voice came back, cold and calm. Let them come. Back at Takeda's house, Ironwood was trapped. He couldn't back down completely, but he couldn't press the attack either. He found a compromise. Fine, he conceded, his voice grudging. For now, you will remain here, with Professor Takeda. Consider yourselves under house arrest. Do not attempt to leave the city. My men will be posted outside. We will be watching you. He leveled a final, warning look at Ash. But know this, Ketchum. One wrong move, and Professor Oak's reputation won't be enough to save you from a very deep, very dark cell. He turned on his heel and left, his officers following in his wake. The tension in the room dissipated, leaving everyone exhausted. Thank you, Professor, Ash said to Takeda, bowing deeply. I only bought you time, the old man cautioned. Commander Ironwood is a bulldog. He will not let this go. He believes in order above all else. And you, young man, are the embodiment of chaos to him. As dusk fell, they found themselves confined to Takeda's peaceful estate, a gilded cage. The political game had been draining, more exhausting than any Pokemon battle. Ash felt a new kind of frustration. He had the power to fight monsters, but it was useless against bureaucracy. He was in the garden, watching the koi swim in lazy circles, when he sensed a subtle shift in the air. A flicker of deceit. Not the overwhelming dread of malice, but the small, sharp sting of a lie. It was coming from the front of the house. He quietly made his way to the entryway. One of Ironwood's guards was posted at the gate. But a city maintenance worker was there as well, claiming there was a fault in the area's power grid that needed immediate attention inside the compound. Ash focused his aura, filtering out the noise, and zeroed in on the maintenance worker. He felt the man's true emotions, a cold, predatory focus, a fanatic's zeal. An Eclipse spy. He was trying to talk his way inside, to get a clear shot or plant a device. Ash didn't shout. He didn't raise an alarm. He walked calmly to the gate. Excuse me, officer, he said to the League guard. The guard turned, annoyed. I think the commander would want to know that your power grid has a more serious problem. He looked at the Eclipse agent. There's a rat in the lines. The agent's eyes widened in recognition. He knew he was made. He abandoned the pretense, his hand darting inside his jacket. But Ash was already moving. He slammed the heavy garden gate shut, the solid wood striking the agent's arm and knocking his weapon, a compact energy pistol, to the ground. The lead guard, finally realizing what was happening, drew his own sidearm. Freeze. League security. The agent, his plan foiled, didn't surrender. He threw a small pellet to the ground. It erupted in a thick cloud of black smoke. When it cleared, he was gone, vanished into the alleyways of Goldenrod. The incident was over in seconds. But it was proof. Ash had used his aura not as a weapon of force, but of perception, exposing a threat no one else could see. When Ironwood arrived on the scene minutes later, his face was a mixture of anger and grudging confusion. The recovered weapon was of an unknown design, untraceable. His own men had almost let a saboteur walk right through the front door. He said there was a rat in the lines, the guard reported, shaken. He knew. The kid knew. Ironwood stared at Ash, who stood calmly by the koi pond, his hands in his pockets. The boy was an anomaly, a variable he couldn't account for. And for a man like Ironwood, there was nothing more dangerous. He had won a temporary truce, not through force, but through clarity and foresight. Later that night, the estate was quiet, the guards outside now on high alert. Hope was sitting in the garden, a data pad on her lap, but she wasn't working. She was staring at the reflection of the moon on the water's surface. Ash walked over and sat down on the wooden veranda beside her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She looked up, startled, then offered a small, rare smile. "Too quiet. I'm used to the hum of a server farm." She gestured with her data pad. "I foiled an attempted data breach tonight. At the same time you were exposing that spy at the gate. They were coordinating." "They're not giving up," Ash said. "No," she agreed. "They're adapting. They tried force on the open sea and failed. Now they're trying stealth and political manipulation in the city. They're intelligent." She paused, her gaze turning to him. Her usual detached curiosity was gone, replaced by something more direct, more personal. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words seeming to cost her some effort. "When you first arrived on Valencia, I analyzed you. I saw a reckless, if talented, trainer. My projections indicated a 73% probability that your impulsiveness would be a liability." She looked down at her data pad, then back at him. "My projections were wrong. You're not reckless. You're decisive. You see the whole board in a way I can't quantify. In the temple, on the sea, and here tonight, you don't just react. You perceive and you act with absolute clarity. I was skeptical of the professor's faith in you. I am not skeptical anymore." Coming from Hope, the pragmatic, data-driven analyst, the admission was more powerful than any effusive praise. It was an acknowledgement of a truth that existed beyond her charts and numbers. It was an expression of trust. "We all have our parts to play, Hope," Ash said simply. "Yours is just as important as mine." They sat in silence for a while, the quiet of the garden a comfortable space between them. The bond with Charity had been forged in empathy. The bond with Faith in combat. The bond with Ivy in sacrifice. Tonight, in a quiet garden in a city full of enemies, a bond was forged with Hope. It was a bond of mutual respect, an alliance of the intuitive and the analytical, two different kinds of intelligence finding common ground in a world that was rapidly running out of it. The harem, as a lesser man might have called it, was proving to be something far more profound, a council of war, a fortress of loyalty, with Ash at its unshakable center. Chapter 5, An Old Rival and a New War. The house arrest was a strange, tense limbo. Commander Ironwood's men were a constant, visible presence outside Professor Takeda's walls, a stark reminder of their precarious legal standing. Yet, inside, a quiet storm of preparation was brewing. Ivy and Takeda were cross-referencing ancient texts with the salvaged eclipse data, searching for patterns, for prophecies, for anything that could predict their enemy's next move. Hope was in constant, silent war in the digital realm, fortifying their security and hunting for whispers of eclipse activity. Faith used the estate's dojo to maintain her sharp physical edge, her movements a blur of controlled violence. Ash, his aura slowly regenerating, spent his time not in battle, but in focus. He sat for hours by the koi pond, not meditating in a traditional sense, but expanding his senses. He learned to differentiate the emotional textures of the city beyond the walls, the hurried stress of a businessman, the bright joy of a child, the placid contentment of a mill tank on a nearby farm. He was mapping the emotional geography of Goldenrod, training his unique senses for a battle he knew was coming. It was on the third day of their confinement that a new, unexpected variable arrived. The sharp, almost arrogant confidence of the newcomer's presence was so distinct, so jarringly familiar, that Ash felt it long before he heard the voice. Honestly, Gramps, you'd think a city of this size could afford a better class of guard dogs. These guys look like they'd have trouble arresting a particularly slow metapod. Ash stood up and turned toward the front gate. Leaning against a sleek, black convertible parked brazenly in the fire lane was a young man with spiky brown hair, a smug smirk, and an air of effortless superiority that hadn't diminished one bit over the years. He wore a dark, practical researcher's coat over a black turtleneck, a far cry from the casual trainer gear Ash remembered. Gary Oak had arrived. He wasn't alone. Standing beside him was his Blastoise, its shell gleaming, its cannons looking even more formidable than Ash remembered. But it was the Pokémon on his other side that drew Ash's attention, a magnificent Umbreon, its black fur seeming to drink the sunlight, the golden rings on its body glowing with a faint, contained power. Ironwood's guards had moved to intercept him, but Gary simply held up a data pad with a high-level Pokémon League researcher's ID. "Relax, fellas. I'm expected." He looked past them, his eyes locking onto Ash across the garden. The smirk widened. Well. Look what the Stantler dragged in. Heard you finally won something, Ashy boy. I was starting to think you were aiming for a participation trophy collection." The old rivalry flared, hot and immediate. "Gary," Ash said, his voice level, though it was an effort to keep the annoyance out of it. Professor Takeda's assistant hurried to the gate. Professor Oak had apparently called ahead, paving the way for his grandson's arrival. Gary was waved through, his Umbreon padding silently at his heels. He strode into the garden as if he owned it, his gaze sweeping over the scene, taking in the house, the other occupants, and finally settling back on Ash. "So, this is your new crew," Gary said, his tone a mixture of condescension and genuine curiosity. He gave Ivy a clinical, appraising look. "Professor Ivy. Your work on Vileplume pollen variations was adequate. A bit derivative of my grandfather's early research, but a solid effort." Ivy's eyebrow shot up, a flicker of irritation crossing her face at the casual dismissal of her work by a researcher half her age. Gary's gaze then fell on Charity, Hope, and Faith. "And her entourage. Impressive. You always did have a habit of collecting strays, Ash." "They're my team, Gary," Ash said, his voice hardening. "And we're a little busy right now." "Oh, I know," Gary's smirk vanished, replaced by a sudden, intense seriousness that was far more unnerving. "You're busy getting yourselves on the League's most wanted list, stumbling into things you don't understand, and leaving a trail of destruction from here to the Orange Islands. I'm not here to trade insults, Ash. I'm here because you're in over your head." He tapped his own data pad. A holographic image shimmered to life, a chart showing subtle, anomalous energy readings detected in soil samples from the area around the burned tower. "I'm a researcher now, Ash. A real one. And for the past 6 months, I've been tracking this. A creeping blight. A slow decay of bioenergy in certain geologically significant locations. It's subtle, almost undetectable. But it's there. A cancer spreading through Johto." He looked at Ash, his eyes sharp. "Then I started hearing rumors. A phantom army. A possessed Gyarados on Valencia. A seismic event that wiped a structure off the map. And at the center of it all, rumors about you. About some new power." He gestured to Ash. "I put it all together. You didn't just stumble into this. You're a part of it." The confrontation was no longer about who was the better trainer. It was an ideological clash. "This is a scientific problem, Ash," Gary argued, his voice filled with conviction. This dark energy is a quantifiable phenomenon. It can be studied, analyzed, and neutralized with the right application of technology and knowledge. That artifact on your belt, he pointed to the GS ball, is the key. It's a Rosetta Stone for this entire crisis. It needs to be in a secure laboratory, studied by the best minds in the world, starting with me and my grandfather. Not carried around like a good luck charm by a guy whose primary strategy is to hit things really, really hard. You're wrong, Gary, Ash countered, his voice quiet but firm. You can't put this in a petri dish. It's not just energy. It's a will. A consciousness. It's an enemy that has to be fought. With what? Your feelings. Gary scoffed. This isn't a battle of friendship and believing in yourself, Ash. This is about data, strategy, and control. Your aura is a dangerous, unstable variable. Leaving it in your hands is like giving a child a fusion reactor to play with. You'll end up blowing a hole in the whole region. The tension between them was a palpable thing, a crackling field of energy. It was the irresistible force of Ash's intuitive power against the immovable object of Gary's scientific certainty. Let's settle this, Gary said, a familiar, competitive fire igniting in his eyes. The way we always used to. A battle. One-on-one. You and me. If I win, you hand over the GS ball and agree to cooperate with a formal league investigation, under my supervision. If you win, then maybe I'll concede that there's more to this than what my scanners can read. Ash didn't hesitate. You're on. They stood facing each other in the estate's large, open dojo. Ivy, her team, Misty, and Tracy watched from the sidelines, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. This was more than a rivalry, it was a clash of philosophies, with the fate of their mission hanging in the balance. This will be a 3-on-3 battle, Gary declared. No substitutions. Let's see if you've learned anything beyond blind luck, Ashy boy. Go, her across. Ash called, sending out his powerful bug/fighting type. Gary smirked. Predictable. Type advantage isn't everything. Go, Arcanine. Gary's Arcanine was a magnificent specimen, larger and fiercer than Faith's, its fur like a roaring fire. The battle that followed was a masterclass in strategy versus instinct. Gary's Arcanine used extreme speed to run circles around Heracross, peppering it with targeted flamethrower attacks. It was a calculated, surgical assault. Ash closed his eyes, his newly honed senses reaching out. He didn't focus on his Heracross, but on Gary's Arcanine. He felt the Pokémon's rhythm, the slight pause before it changed direction, the buildup of heat before it unleashed its fire. Heracross, stand your ground. Ash commanded. Focus. Heracross took another fiery hit, stumbling. Gary grinned. It's over, Ash. Now. Mega Horn. Ash roared. Heracross didn't. Charge. Following Ash's direction, it pivoted on the spot, its massive horn glowing with power, and thrust upward. It was a move aimed not at where Arcanine was, but where it was going to be. The extreme speeding Arcanine, unable to change its trajectory in time, ran directly onto the point of the horn. The super-effective blow sent it flying, knocked out in one hit. Gary's smirk vanished. He stared, stunned. How? You anticipated its vector perfectly. The timing was impossible. I'm full of surprises, Ash said, a ghost of Gary's own smirk on his face. Gary recalled his Arcanine, his expression hardening. Luck. Let's see you handle this. Go, Umbreon. The sleek, dark Pokémon materialized on the field, its yellow rings pulsing softly. Ash recalled the bruised Heracross. Alright, Pikachu, it's our turn. Pikachu leaped onto the field, sparks flying from his cheeks. A Pikachu against a dark type with high special defense. Bad move, Ash, Gary said, but there was less confidence in his voice now. Pikachu, quick attack. Pikachu shot forward. Umbreon, use Confuse Ray. Gary countered. A bizarre, shimmering energy shot from Umbreon's eyes. But Ash felt the attack coming, a wave of disorienting psychic energy. Pikachu, spin and use Iron Tail on the ground. Pikachu, trusting his trainer implicitly, began to spin, his tail glowing like steel. He slammed it into the dojo's wooden floor just as the Confuse Ray hit. The physical jolt and the act of focusing on the complex maneuver allowed Pikachu to shake off the worst of the psychic attack, his head clearing almost instantly. Impossible. Gary muttered. No Pokemon can just shake off a direct Confuse Ray. My Pokemon are stronger than you think, Ash said. The battle raged on, a breathtaking display of high-level training. Gary's Umbreon was a wall of defense, using Moonlight to heal and feint attack to strike from the shadows. But Ash's Aura-linked commands gave Pikachu a precognitive edge, allowing him to dodge attacks that should have been unavoidable. The battle was reaching its climax, Pikachu and Umbreon locked in a fierce stalemate, when the world went wrong. A low, rumbling explosion echoed from the city center, powerful enough to rattle the windows of the dojo. It was followed by another, and then another. Screams began to rise from the streets outside, a chorus of panic and terror. A shrill alarm blared from Hope's data pad. Multiple energy signatures flaring up all over the city, she yelled, her face pale. They're not localized. It's a coordinated, city-wide assault. The battle between Ash and Gary was forgotten. They all rushed outside, into the garden, and stared toward the skyline. Plumes of black smoke were rising from several districts. The hum of the city had become a roar of chaos. They're here, Ivy said, her voice grim. Team Eclipse. They've decided to stop playing in the shadows. But why this? Misty asked, horrified. Why attack the whole city? It's a diversion, Ash realized instantly, his mind racing. A massive, terrifying diversion. They're not trying to conquer Goldenrod. They're trying to draw every league official, every trainer, every ounce of resistance away from their real target. Gary's eyes widened as the same conclusion hit him. Us. The GS ball. As if on cue, the wall of Takeda's estate exploded inward. A massive, corrupted Tyranitar, its eyes glowing with the familiar, sick purple light of malice, smashed through the stone and wood, roaring a challenge. It was followed by a dozen Team Eclipse grunts, clad in their black tactical gear, their Pokemon, Houndoom, Scizor, Gengar, fanning out, forming a perimeter. The house arrest had become a siege. So much for the League's protection, Faith snarled, already moving to a defensive position, her Machhoke stepping in front of the professors. The battle with Gary was over. A new, desperate war had just begun. Gary, with me. Ash yelled, not as a rival, but as a commander. There was no time for argument. Gary, his face a mask of grim fury, simply nodded, his Umbreon taking a position beside Pikachu. Ivy, get Takeda to the safe room in the basement. Ash commanded. Charity, Hope, provide support from the house. Faith, Misty, you're on crowd control. Don't let them push past the garden. The orders were clean, decisive. No one questioned them. Ash's team moved with practiced efficiency. The corrupted Tyranitar unleashed a dark pulse, a wave of pure destructive void energy. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Gary, Blastoise, Hydro Cannon. Ash yelled. A brilliant spear of lightning and a colossal, high-pressure jet of water slammed into the dark pulse. The three attacks met in a torrential explosion of light, water, and shadow, the force of it shaking the very ground. The garden became a war zone. Faith's Machhoke engaged a Scizor in a brutal flurry of punches. Misty's Politoed and Starmie created a wall of water and psychic energy, holding back a pack of snarling Houndoom. Gary was no longer the arrogant rival, he was a brilliant strategist under fire, his Blastoise a living fortress, its cannons pivoting to intercept threats with pinpoint accuracy. But Ash was the storm's eye. He stood at the center of the chaos, his aura flaring not as a gentle wave but as a burning beacon. He wasn't just issuing commands, he was a living battle computer, his mind processing 100 different variables at once. He saw a Jengar phasing through the floor to ambush Misty from behind, and directed his newly evolved Noctowl to intercept it with a foresight-powered psychic blast. He felt a grunt aiming a stun weapon at Gary, and had his Bulbasaur's vines erupt from the ground to ensnare the man's legs. He and Gary fought back-to-back, a seamless fusion of instinct and strategy. Incoming, 3 o'clock. Gary would shout, having analyzed an attack pattern. I feel it, Ash would reply, already moving to counter an attack Gary hadn't even seen yet. They were pushing them back. Despite being outnumbered, their combined strength and the flawless coordination Ash provided were turning the tide. The lead Eclipse grunt, a grim-faced woman with a scar across her eye, saw it too. Forget the ball. The priority has changed, she roared over the din of battle. The Lightbringer is too dangerous. Eliminate him. All forces, concentrate on Ash Ketchum. Suddenly, the entire focus of the attack shifted. Every Eclipse grunt, every corrupted Pokémon, turned their attention on Ash. It was a terrifying, overwhelming wave of violence. Gary's Blastoise created a wall of water to shield him. Faith's Mach-Hoke threw itself in front of a hyper beam meant for him. But they couldn't block everything. A shadow ball from a Jengar slipped through their defenses. Ash saw it coming. He knew he couldn't dodge in time. But he wasn't alone. Just as the ball of spectral energy was about to hit him, a flash of red and gold intercepted it. Charizard had released himself from his Pokeball. He landed in front of Ash with a ground-shaking roar, a living wall of fire and fury. His eyes burned with a protective loyalty that was hotter than any flame. He had felt his trainer's peril, his bond with Ash so strong it had transcended the confines of his Pokeball. He unleashed a flamethrower of incredible intensity, forcing the Eclipse forces to fall back. The tide had turned again. But the chaos in the city was escalating. Sirens wailed in the distance. Commander Ironwood and his forces, who had been drawn away by the initial attacks, were now fighting a desperate battle on multiple fronts across the city. Team Eclipse had successfully plunged the entire region's command center into disarray. And then, from the smoking crater of the wall, a new figure stepped through. He wore the dark robes of a high-ranking Eclipse member, but his presence was different. It was colder, more focused. It was the High Priest Ash had seen in his visions, the man who had despaired at the world and embraced the void. He ignored the battle raging around him, his gaze fixing only on Ash. So, the new light burns brightly, the High Priest said, his voice calm and resonant amidst the chaos. A fire in the dark. But all fires consume, and all fires eventually die. Malice offers an end to the flame. An end to the pain. Perfect, eternal silence. He raised a hand, and the corrupted Tyranitar beside him let out a roar, preparing to unleash a devastating Giga Impact. Ash stood firm, Pikachu on one shoulder, Charizard at his back, and Gary at his side. He looked at the chaos, at the enemy before him, at the city under siege. Their little skirmish was over. The war had just been declared on a global stage. Their rivalry was dead, burned away in the fires of a shared battle. In its place, something new and far more powerful was being forged, an alliance. An alliance against the coming silence. You talk a lot about silence, Ash said, his voice cutting through the noise, his aura flaring with defiant, brilliant life. Let's see how you handle a little noise. Chapter 6, The weight of the world. The silence that followed the storm was more jarring than the chaos itself. Team Eclipse did not fight to the last man. As suddenly as they had attacked, they vanished. The High Priest, after his cryptic pronouncement, simply melted back into the shadows of the ruined wall. The corrupted Tyranitar, on his silent command, unleashed one final, devastating Stone Edge attack not as an offensive move, but as cover, creating a massive cloud of dust and debris. When it settled, they were gone. They had made their statement, tested their enemy's strength, and withdrawn with the same chilling efficiency they did everything else. Goldenrod City was left scarred and terrified. The fires were being fought, the wounded tended to, but a palpable fear now coated the city like a layer of ash. The attack had been too coordinated, too widespread. It wasn't the work of a simple criminal organization, it was a military operation. The world had been shaken awake. Professor Takeda's serene estate was a wreck. The garden was a cratered mess of scorched earth and shattered rock. The house itself, while standing, bore the deep scars of battle. But it had held. They had held. In the immediate aftermath, there was no celebration, only a grim, adrenaline-fueled accounting. Charity, her face smudged with dirt, moved with quiet urgency, tending to both human and Pokemon injuries. Misty's Politoed had a nasty burn on its arm, Gary's Blastoise had deep gouges in its shell, and Faith's Machoke was nursing several bruised limbs. They were alive, but they were battered. Commander Ironwood arrived an hour later, his uniform disheveled, his face etched with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. His forces had been run ragged, chasing ghosts all over the city while the real battle had happened right under his nose. He surveyed the destruction in Takeda's garden, his eyes lingering on the spot where the corrupted Tyranitar had stood. He saw the evidence of a battle far beyond the scope of any normal Pokemon fight. He walked over to where Ash and Gary stood, side by side, near the ruined wall. He didn't look at Gary, the grandson of his colleague. He looked at Ash. His expression was no longer one of suspicion, but of a grim, reluctant understanding. "Your house arrest is over, Ketchum," Ironwood said, his voice rough. "The League Committee is in emergency session. Your story, which I dismissed as fantasy, has just become the only plausible explanation for the single most coordinated act of domestic terrorism in this nation's history." He paused, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "I was wrong." It wasn't an apology. It was a concession to a reality that had become too big to ignore. "We need a full debriefing. Everything you know. Everything." The debriefing was a long, grueling affair held in a secure underground bunker beneath the Goldenrod radio tower. It was Ash, Ivy, and Gary facing Ironwood and a holographic panel of grim-faced, high-ranking League officials. Ivy laid out the science, her presentation crisp and terrifying, detailing the nature of the dark energy and the evidence of Malice's growing influence. Gary provided tactical analysis of Team Eclipse, their methods, their technology, and their military discipline. But it was Ash who held the room. He didn't present data, he told his story. He spoke of the feeling of the corrupted Gyarados' pain, the oppressive silence of the sunken temple, the cold fanaticism in the eyes of the grunts. He spoke of his aura, not as a weapon, but as a sense, an antenna for the life of the world and the void that sought to consume it. He spoke with a simple, unadorned honesty that was more compelling than any scientific chart. When he finished, the room was silent. He had given them the truth, and it was a terrible one. They were given new quarters, a secure wing in the League's regional headquarters building. The Vanguard was moved to a lockdown military dock for repairs under armed guard. They had, in effect, been conscripted. The weight of officialdom settled upon them, a heavy blanket of meetings, reports, and strategic planning sessions. And it was in this sterile, official world that Ash began to fray. He'd walk through the halls of the headquarters, and the place felt dead to him. The air was thick with the low-grade stress and ambition of bureaucrats and officials. It was a pale, gray noise compared to the vibrant life of the outside world, and it grated on his senses. He was a creature of open skies and winding roads, and this concrete box was a cage. The real problem, however, came when he slept. The visions started. They weren't dreams. They were immersions. He would find himself floating in a silent, starless void. There was no up or down, no beginning or end. There was only a profound and terrifying stillness. He felt no fear, no anger, no joy. He felt nothing. The silence was seductive, promising an end to struggle, an end to pain. It was the peace of the grave, the ultimate entropy, and it whispered to him that all the noise of life, the battles, the laughter, the love, the loyalty, was meaningless, a brief, chaotic flicker before the inevitable, eternal calm. He would wake up gasping, his heart hammering, the sheets soaked with a cold sweat. The silence would cling to him, a psychic residue that muted the colors of the morning and dampened the taste of his food. He could feel it trying to erode him, to convince him of the futility of his own fight. He grew quiet, withdrawn. The easy, confident smile that had been his trademark was seen less and less. He spent his time training, but it was different now. It was relentless, punishing. He pushed himself and his Pokémon to the absolute brink of exhaustion, as if hoping to drown out the silence with pure, physical effort. He stood in the headquarters advanced training room, a vast, holographic chamber that could simulate any environment. He was sparring with Charizard, pushing the fire lizard harder than ever before. Again. Ash yelled, his voice raw. Dragon Rage. Full power. Charizard, sensing his trainer's desperate, frantic energy, unleashed a blast of draconic power that shimmered against the holographic walls. Not good enough. Faster. Stronger. Ash shouted, his frustration boiling over. The others watched from the observation deck, their faces etched with worry. He's going to burn himself out, Misty said, her arms crossed tightly. She tried to break through to him with their old, familiar banter, snapping at him and calling him a dense kid, but her words just bounced off the wall of his abstraction. He'd just give her a tired look and walk away, and it hurt more than any of their fiercest arguments. His aura levels are unstable, Ivy observed, studying a reading on her data pad. They're fluctuating wildly. The massive outputs, combined with the psychological pressure from Malice, it's taking a significant toll. He's running on fumes. He's running from the quiet, Gary said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. He had seen the look in Ash's eyes after he woke from a particularly bad vision. It was a haunted look, one that Gary, for all his intelligence, had no frame of reference for. He had tried to approach it logically, offering theories on psychic warfare and mental conditioning, but Ash had just shaken his head. You don't get it, Gary. You can't put it in a textbook. They all felt helpless. They were a team of brilliant, capable individuals, but they were faced with a wound they couldn't see, a battle being fought entirely within Ash's soul. It was Faith who decided she'd had enough. She had watched him for days, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She saw the tremor in his hands when he thought no one was looking, the way his gaze would go distant, the sheer, brutal self-punishment of his training. She saw a commander on the verge of breaking, and her ingrained sense of loyalty, of duty, would not allow it. She entered the training room, the door hissing shut behind her. That's enough, she said, her voice cutting through the noise of the battle. Training is over. Ash ignored her, his back to her. Charizard, flamethrower. Maximum output. I said, that's enough. Faith's voice was like a whip crack. She strode forward and stood directly in Charizard's path. The massive fire Pokémon halted his attack instantly, looking from the small, unmoving woman to his trainer in confusion. Get out of the way, Faith, Ash said, his voice dangerously low. No, she replied, her arms crossed, her stance immovable. You're not training. You're trying to break something. And I think it's yourself. You don't know what you're talking about, he growled, finally turning to face her. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale and drawn. Don't I? She challenged. I know a soldier on the brink of combat fatigue when I see one. You're pushing until you collapse because you're afraid to stop. You're afraid of what's waiting for you in the quiet. So you fill the air with noise. She took a step closer. Whatever it is you're fighting in your head, you can't beat it by running yourself into the ground. A dull blade is useless, Ash. And you are getting dull. A raw nerve had been struck. I'm fine, he snapped, his fists clenching. No, you're not, Faith said, her voice softening slightly, but losing none of its steel. You think you're the only one this is affecting? Ivy can't sleep, she just works. Hope triple checks every line of code, terrified she'll miss something. Charity puts on a brave face, but she jumps at every shadow. Misty and Gary are snapping at each other because they're worried sick and don't know what to do. Your fear, your exhaustion, it's bleeding out. It's affecting the whole team. A leader doesn't have the luxury of breaking down alone. Your strength isn't just your power, Ash. It's the faith we have in you. And you're letting that faith crumble. Her words hit him harder than any physical blow. He looked past her, to the observation window, and saw the worried faces of his friends. His family. He had been so lost in his own private war that he hadn't seen the collateral damage he was causing. The guilt was a sharp, physical pain. I see it when I sleep, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. The emptiness. The silence. It tells me that none of this matters. That we've already lost. Faith nodded slowly. So you fight it. But you're fighting it the wrong way. You can't punch a shadow. You're trying to use your fists for a fight that requires your heart. She uncrossed her arms and dropped into a low, balanced stance. All right. You want to fight? You want to hit something? Fine. Hit me. Ash stared at her. What? You heard me. No Pokemon. No aura. Just you and me. Hand to hand. I'm not going to let you beat yourself up anymore. So if you need to hit something, you're going to hit me. I can take it. Show me what you're so afraid of. Let it out. He hesitated. But the raw, coiled frustration inside him, the terror and the anger, needed a release. He nodded, a single, sharp jerk of his head. He sent Charizard back to the observation deck, the Pokemon's concerned rumble echoing in the quiet room. They faced each other in the center of the vast, empty chamber. Come on, Faith urged. Ash lunged, his attack a clumsy, rage-fueled swing. Faith sidestepped it with fluid ease and slapped his arm, the sting of it sharp and grounding. Too slow. Too angry. Anger makes you sloppy. He came at her again, throwing a series of punches. She deflected them effortlessly, her movements a blur of economy and precision. She didn't strike back. She just moved, a calm, immovable object against his frantic, chaotic force. She was forcing him to focus, to move past the blind rage. You're fighting your own body, she chided, blocking a kick. You're not in sync. You're letting the fear drive you instead of your will. Feel my movements. Anticipate. Use that sense of yours. He started to breathe, to push past the red haze of his anger. He remembered his sparring sessions with her on the Vanguard, the feel of her intent, the flow of combat. He stopped trying to overwhelm her and started to see her. They moved, a dance of violence in the silent room. It was no longer a one-sided flurry. Ash began to anticipate her blocks, to flow around her defenses. He landed a glancing blow on her shoulder. She responded with a swift kick to his thigh that made his leg buckle. The pain was real, sharp, and blessedly present. It cut through the psychic fog. They fought for what felt like an hour, sweat pouring down both their faces. He was getting tired, but it was a good tired now, the clean burn of physical exertion, not the soul-deep weariness of before. He saw an opening, a feint she'd used before, and instead of falling for it, he dropped low, sweeping her legs out from under her. She hit the mat with a soft thud, completely surprised. He stood over her, breathing heavily, his hands on his knees. He had won. Faith lay on her back for a moment, then a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. She started to laugh, a low, throaty sound of pure release. "There you are," she said, looking up at him. "I was wondering where you'd gone." She sat up, rubbing her shoulder. "A leader is allowed to have doubts, Ash. A soldier is allowed to be afraid. We all are. But we are not allowed to break. Because others depend on us." She got to her feet and stood in front of him, her amber eyes serious. "You are the source of our hope. Not because you're invincible, but because you never, ever give up. Not on your Pokemon, not on your friends, and not on the world. So don't you dare give up on yourself." She put a hand on his shoulder, her grip firm and steady. "We are your shield. Let us do our job." In that moment, looking into her fierce, loyal eyes, something inside him settled. The gnawing dread didn't vanish, but it receded. The silence was still there, at the edge of his hearing, but it no longer had the same power over him. He wasn't a lone soldier fighting a hopeless war in the dark. He was a commander with an army at his back. An army of friends. An army of family. He pulled her into a sudden, fierce hug, his arms wrapping around her strong shoulders. She was stiff with surprise for a second, then her own arms came up and held him, just as fiercely. It wasn't romantic. It was the desperate, grateful embrace of comrades in arms, a silent acknowledgement of a debt that could never be repaid. That night, when the vision came, it was different. He was in the same silent, starless void. The seductive peace of nothingness washed over him. "It's so much easier to let go," the silence whispered. "All this struggle, for what? It all ends the same." But this time, he wasn't alone. He saw Faith's unwavering gaze. He heard Charity's gentle encouragement. He felt Hope's quiet, solid belief. He saw Ivy's sharp, brilliant mind working to protect him. He saw Misty's fiery loyalty, Gary's grudging respect, and Pikachu's absolute, unconditional love. They were points of light in the overwhelming darkness. They were his noise. He looked into the heart of the void, and for the first time, he spoke to it. "You're wrong," he projected, his thought a single, defiant spark. "It's the struggle that gives it meaning. It's the noise that makes the silence worth fighting." A tremor went through the void, a flicker of what felt like surprise, of anger. For the first time, the silence felt less like a force of nature and more like a conscious, hateful entity. He had touched its nerve. He saw a flash, a vision within the vision. He saw the birth of the universe, a great, silent egg of potential. He saw it crack, and from it burst a being of incandescent light and infinite creation, Arceus. But as the light poured out, it cast a shadow. A shadow of non-existence, a cosmic afterbirth of pure negation. Malice. It wasn't evil. It was balance. But it was a balance that hated the equation. Its sole purpose, its entire identity, was to correct creation by unmaking it, by returning everything to the perfect, silent totality that had existed before the first spark. The vision shattered. Ash woke up, gasping, but his eyes were clear. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. He was no longer haunted. He was armed. He knew his enemy. Not just its methods, but its nature, its origin, its purpose. He got out of bed, dressed, and walked to the command center where his team was gathered, poring over maps. They all looked up as he entered. The change in him was immediate and striking. The haunted look was gone. The withdrawal had vanished. The commander had returned. He stood before them, his team, his family, and his eyes held the weight of the world, not as a burden, but as a responsibility he was finally ready to carry. "I know what we have to do," he said, his voice calm and absolute. "Team Eclipse has a high priest. They have a holy site. They're planning a ritual to break Malice's seal for good. We've been reacting. We've been defending." He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze instilling a new fire in their hearts. Now, we go on the offensive. Chapter 7, The Altar of the First Dawn. The offensive began not with a bang, but with a whisper. Professor Takeda, his home now a temporary League outpost, had become the linchpin of their intelligence operation. While Ivy's science and Hope's data provided the what, Takeda's ancient lore provided the where and why. He spent days poring over fragile scrolls and weathered stone tablets, his gentle hands tracing lines of text that hadn't been read in centuries. It was a small, overlooked passage in a scroll detailing the myths of dragon-type Pokemon in Johto that provided the breakthrough. It spoke of a place where the world's first breath was taken and its last will be drawn, a sacred site predating even the tin and brass towers. It called it the Altar of the First Dawn. The text described it as a place sealed away by the ancient dragon masters, hidden behind the dragon's fang, a place so dangerous that its location was erased from all but the most forbidden histories. Behind the dragon's fang, Ivy murmured, looking at a topographical map of Johto. Her finger traced the rugged mountain range that culminated in Blackthorn City. The dragon's Denver. It's not in the main den, Takeda clarified, pointing to a different section of the scroll. The shrine where trainers go to be tested is a decoy, a guardhouse. The true location is deeper, in the sealed, unstable caverns behind the main shrine. A place the Blackthorn clan themselves are forbidden from entering. Hope's fingers flew across her holographic keyboard, overlaying Takeda's translation with geological surveys and old mining charts. There's a massive cave system back there, yes. It's marked as structurally unsound and prone to seismic activity. But there's more. There's an energy signature. Faint, heavily shielded, but it's there. It's the same frequency as the obelisk from the sunken temple, only 1,000 times more powerful. That's it. That's Malice's primary seal. A grim silence fell over the command center. This was it. The point of no return. Team Eclipse would be there. Their high priest would be there. They would be preparing the final ritual to shatter the seal and unleash their silent god upon the world. We can't launch a full-scale assault, Commander Ironwood said, his face a grim mask. He was a full-fledged, if reluctant, ally now. The attack on Goldenrod had stripped him of his bureaucratic certainty, leaving behind a hardened pragmatist. A large military force moving on Blackthorn would be detected hours in advance. Eclipse would either accelerate their ritual or dig in for a siege we can't afford. This has to be a surgical strike. A plan was forged, born of desperation and a fragile new alliance. Ironwood would deploy a small, elite unit of his most trusted rangers. Their job was not to attack the altar directly, but to engage the bulk of Team Eclipse's forces in the outer caverns of the Dragon's Den, creating a diversion and containing the battle. It was a holding action, a suicide mission designed to buy time. The true strike force would be small, fast, and unencumbered. It would be Ash's core team. They would use the chaos of Ironwood's diversion to slip through the front lines and infiltrate the inner sanctum, their sole objective, stop the ritual and defeat the High Priest. The night before the operation, the air was thick with unspoken tension. They gathered on the roof of the League headquarters, the lights of Goldenrod spreading out below them like a field of captive stars. It was a world they were fighting to protect. Misty stood by the ledge, staring out at the city. "It's funny," she said quietly. "All I ever wanted was to be the best water-type trainer in the world. I never thought," she trailed off, shaking her head. Gary, standing nearby, finished her thought. "You'd be trying to stop the apocalypse with a loudmouth from Pallet Town." A rare, humorless smile touched his lips. "Neither did I." Their rivalry felt like a lifetime ago, a petty squabble from a simpler age. Charity was checking her medical kit for the 10th time, her hands moving with a nervous energy. Hope was running final diagnostics on their comm units, her focus a shield against the fear. Faith stood beside Ash, sharpening a combat knife on a whetstone. The rhythmic, scraping sound was a steadying presence in the anxious quiet. She didn't look at him, but he could feel her coiled readiness, her absolute trust. She was a weapon, and he was the one who aimed her. Ivy came to stand next to Ash, her gaze on the distant mountains. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "No," Ash answered honestly, his eyes following her gaze. "But it doesn't matter. It has to be done." He felt the weight of it, the lives of Ironwood's men, the fate of his friends, the future of the world, all resting on his shoulders. But the crushing burden he'd felt before was gone. Now, it was just a heavy, solid reality. He could carry it. Because he wasn't carrying it alone. The infiltration was a nightmare of darkness and violence. They flew to the outskirts of Blackthorn City under the cover of a moonless night in a black, unmarked helicopter. They landed in a desolate patch of badlands, the wind whistling through jagged rock formations. From there, it was on foot. The entrance to the dragon's den was already a battlefield. The distinctive concussive blasts of League-issue stun weapons and the chaotic flashes of Pokémon attacks echoed from the mouth of the cave. Ironwood's diversion had begun. Explosions lit up the cavern entrance, casting dancing, monstrous shadows. "That's our cue," Faith said, her voice low. "The main entrance is a kill zone." Takeda's maps showed a secondary access point, a fissure on the mountain's western face. "It'll be unguarded, but it's a tight squeeze." They moved like ghosts along the mountainside, their dark gear blending into the rock. They found the fissure, a narrow crack in the stone barely wide enough for a person to slip through. One by one, they descended into the earth's gullet. The caverns were a labyrinth. The air was cold and damp, smelling of wet stone and something else, a faint, metallic tang of wrongness. It was the scent of Malice's influence, seeping through the very rock. Their only light came from the soft glow of Faith's tactical flashlight and the faint, internal light of Ash's own aura. Suddenly, Faith held up a hand, signaling them to halt. She pointed ahead. A patrol. 2 Eclipse grunts and a hulking, aggressive Nidoking. They were blocking the main passage. Before anyone could suggest a plan, Gary acted. He held up a single Pokeball and whispered to it. A moment later, his Jengar materialized from the shadows behind the grunts, completely silent. It tapped the Nidoking on the shoulder. As the massive Pokémon turned, Jengar's eyes glowed, and it used hypnosis. The Nidoking swayed and collapsed with a heavy thud, fast asleep. The grunt spun around, confused, only to be met by a swift, silent takedown. Faith and Gary moved in perfect sync, one disabling each grunt before they could even utter a cry. The efficiency was terrifying. They pressed on, deeper into the mountain's heart. The distant sounds of Ironwood's battle faded, replaced by a low, resonant humming that grew steadily louder. It was the sound of the ritual. They emerged into a colossal cavern, a space so vast it felt like an underground sky. Great, glowing crystals studded the ceiling, casting a dim, ethereal light. In the center of this cavern was the altar of the first dawn. It was a massive, circular platform of polished black obsidian, carved with a spiraling galaxy of dead stars. And at its heart, a shimmering, multi-layered sphere of crackling black energy pulsed with unimaginable power. This was the seal. And it was visibly cracking, veins of pure void energy breaking through its surface. The high priest stood before the seal, his arms outstretched, chanting in the same guttural language they'd heard in the temple. He was flanked by his elite guard, a dozen of the most formidable Eclipse members. Their Pokémon, Dragonite, Metagross, Salamence, stood like obsidian statues, their eyes glowing with corruption. This was the enemy's inner sanctum. "The party started without us," Misty whispered, her hand tightening on her Pokeball. There was no more time for stealth. Now! Ash roared. The strike was instant and overwhelming. Ash, Gary, and Misty released their strongest Pokémon in a coordinated wave. Charizard, Blastoise, and Gyarados materialized in a thunderous trio of power, their battle cries echoing in the immense cavern. The battle for the altar of the first dawn began. It was a conflict of titans. Charizard, now fully in sync with Ash's aura, engaged a corrupted Dragonite in a furious aerial duel, their flamethrowers and hyper beams colliding in brilliant, violent explosions. Gary's Blastoise became a spinning bastion of defense, its hydro cannons blasting away at a menacing Metagross. Misty's Gyarados, a creature of pure, untainted rage, met a corrupted Salamence head-on, their battle a thrashing, brutal contest of raw power. The rest of the team had their roles. Ivy, surprisingly, was in the thick of it. She wasn't a battler, but she was a genius. Their power conduits are channeled through those smaller crystals, she yelled over the din, pointing her data pad at a series of smaller, glowing stones surrounding the altar. They're acting as relays for the ritual. Destroy them. Hope, from a secure position behind a rock formation, was already working, her fingers a blur on her portable console. I'm trying to create a resonance cascade. If I can overload one, it might start a chain reaction. Charity was their lifeline, directing her Blissey to heal injured Pokémon with soft, glowing eggs of energy, a beacon of life in the midst of destruction. And Faith. Faith was a whirlwind of controlled fury. She and her Mach-Hoke moved as one, a four-armed, two-legged engine of destruction. They weren't fighting the Pokémon, they were fighting the trainers. She moved through the Eclipse Elite Guard like a phantom, her strikes precise and disabling. She was the tip of the spear, creating chaos in their ranks, preventing them from focusing on the ritual. Ash was the heart of the battle, the central node through which everything flowed. He stood his ground, Pikachu on his shoulder, his aura a brilliant, golden sun in the gloom. He was coordinating it all, a constant stream of commands, warnings, and encouragement flowing to his team. He felt Faith's flank being threatened and sent his Snorlax, released in a flash, to body slam the approaching threat. Into the ground. He sensed Misty's Gyarados beginning to tire and had Gary's Alakazam, a new addition to his team, support it with a well-timed reflect. They were a single, multi-limbed organism, fighting with one mind, one will. And Ash was the brain. He pushed forward, cutting a path through the chaos toward the altar. Toward the High Priest. He had to stop the chanting. He was almost there when an Eclipse commander, the same woman with the scar from the siege at Takeda's house, intercepted him. Her powerful Tyranitar, now fully recovered, stood before him, its roar shaking the cavern. "This is as far as you go, Lightbringer," she snarled. "Pikachu, let's go!" Ash yelled. The battle was fierce, a desperate duel in the shadow of the dying seal. But before a victor could be decided, a scream cut through the air. It was Hope. An Eclipse grunt had slipped past their defenses and blasted her console with a disruptor rifle. The device exploded, sending Hope flying backward, her leg twisting at an unnatural angle. The chain reaction she was building fizzled out. The High Priest, sensing the shift, intensified his chanting. The cracks in the seal widened, a wave of pure black energy erupting from it, washing over the cavern. The corrupt Pokémon roared, their power doubling. The tide was turning against them. Ash saw the High Priest raise his hands for a final, catastrophic verse. He knew he wouldn't make it in time. His path was blocked by the Tyranitar. "Faith!" Ash screamed, his voice raw with desperation. "The priest! Stop him!" Faith heard him. She was engaged with two elite guards, her Mach-Hoke locked in a struggle with a Conkeldurr. But she heard the command. She heard the desperation. She made a choice. Without a word, she disengaged from her opponents and charged, a single-minded missile aimed at the High Priest. She was fast, faster than anyone thought possible. She was closing the distance. The High Priest saw her coming. He didn't flinch. He simply lowered one hand and gestured. A shadowy, spectral blade, an attack of pure malice energy, formed in the air and shot toward her. It was an attack not meant for a Pokémon. It was meant for a human. It was an unblockable, soul-killing curse. Ash saw it. He saw Faith's trajectory. He saw the blade. They wouldn't connect. The blade was too fast. Faith was going to die. Time seemed to slow down. He saw her face, her eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering loyalty. She was giving her life to fulfill his command. A primal, agonized roar tore from Ash's throat. He wasn't thinking. He was pure, unadulterated instinct. He poured every last drop of his aura, every ounce of his will, every fiber of his love for his team into a single, desperate act. He didn't erect a shield. He didn't fire a beam. He bent reality. For a single, impossible instant, the space between Faith and the spectral blade warped. The distance stretched. The blade, traveling at an incredible speed, suddenly had an infinite distance to cross. It was enough. Faith slammed into the high priest with the force of a freight train. Her shoulder took the brunt of the impact, a sickening crunch echoing through the cavern as her collarbone shattered, but the tackle was perfect. The high priest was thrown sideways, his body crashing against the obsidian altar. His chant was broken. The effect of Ash's reality-bending act rippled outward. The immense power he had unleashed, untamed and raw, slammed into the already weakened seal. It didn't reinforce it. It didn't destroy it. It cracked it. A high-pitched, shattering sound, like a universe of glass breaking at once, filled the air. The multi-layered sphere of black energy imploded, then exploded outward in a wave of pure, silent, black nothingness. The high priest, lying broken on the altar, began to laugh, a wheezing, triumphant sound. "You fool! You've done it yourself. You tried to stop the coming, but you have only hastened it." The wave of black energy washed over everyone. It didn't hurt. It didn't burn. It just erased. The vibrant colors of the Pokemon attacks faded to gray. The roar of battle, the cries of exertion, all of it was muted, dampened into a dull, flat hum. A creeping, soul-crushing apathy descended upon the cavern, seeping into the minds of everyone present. Pokemon stopped fighting, their drive, their fire, extinguished. Trainers lowered their arms, a sudden, profound sense of futility overwhelming them. What was the point? The high priest was defeated. The ritual was shattered. But the damage was done. The cage was broken. And from the remnants of the seal, a voice echoed. It did not travel through the air. It bloomed in the center of every mind in the cavern, a soundless thunder that was cold, vast, and utterly alien. The silence has begun. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.